Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along. We really appreciate your time. My name's Dave Power. I'm an agency manager in the UK team, and thanks very much for coming, as I said. I'd like to firstly welcome you, the 150 people in this room, and secondly, welcome the 150 people on our Google Plus Hangout. So we will be recording this session and putting it up on YouTube and Google Plus after, so you will be able to see all the content after that. Today's hashtag is future of data. Please post any questions. We'll be taking live questions throughout the day if we have time as part of this hashtag or Q&As in the live audience itself. The boring stuff is the toilets are directly behind me. Okay, so if you guys leave in either door, right and left, and walk through the glass doors behind me, there's toilets either right or left of you throughout the day. So you may need to scan a badge. A Googler will need to scan a badge to get you back in. So ideally, if you could wait for the breaks, that would be appreciated. But other than that, there's nothing really else. We have a break at about 10:50, so you'll have time then. So we sent you guys a questionnaire before you guys came here today, and there were some really interesting stats. So I'm going to let you guys read this quickly instead of competing with the slide. The stuff that I was really surprised with is that the great news, 80% of you guys feel confident about GA. 80% of you guys do not feel confident about UA at all, which is interesting. 76% of you have a tag solution, which is really positive. 83% think it takes less than 3 months to get a tag on your site. I was so staggered when I saw that because I know the absolute pain we all go through each day to try and get some tags on our site. But again, this highlights why we're here. And I think we've noticed in the last kind of 4 to 5 years in Google, in particular, I remember about maybe 6 years, working on digital and search and just logging into AdWords, and that was your kind of day-to-day. Whereas now there's multiple bid management technologies you can use, various other data and analytic technologies you can use, and that adds an extra layer of complexity to what we're dealing with. There's also more and more information for us to manage and more technology for us to choose. So we felt that there wasn't really a platform to have these conversations by bringing different experts to the stage and having conversations with you guys to talk about how this industry can be brought forward and how we can solve and learn from each other. This is the first of the future data events we're running, so we're really going to appreciate your feedback after this. What we will say is we'd like to replicate this, and we'd like to kind of host a forum for these type of events going forward because we feel there's an opportunity to do that. So again, your feedback will be much appreciated. The agenda for today is we've got Matt Bush talking about why data can't be so simple. We've got Oliver Bourne talking about cross-device tracking. We've got Clancy talking about analytics, access, and empowering. And we have a little coffee break. We have the guys from Wildfire and DoubleClick talking about database and media buys using social signals. And Aidan talking about Google Tag Solution. And a great panel later on with Rob Jackson from Eliza, Graham Cook from Qubit, and Clancy from Google Analytics as well. So if time, we'll have questions throughout the day. But first up, we're going to have Matt Bush talking about why data can't be so simple. Thanks again for coming, guys.
Morning, all. So there's lots of heavy stuff coming, lots and lots of heavy stuff coming. So I'm kind of here to ease you into the day and like try and give you a glimpse of why we think this is really important and why we think you should act now. And there are a couple of reasons behind this. The first one is that big data, big data, it's a bit like, to me, it's a bit like a Republican or Democrat kind of conversation. It's a bit like an EU summit. There's loads and loads of chat. There's loads and loads of opinion, but there's not really any actions, not really any solutions, and not really agreed ways going forward. And I think part of this is that we're making it overly complex. We're trying to make it more difficult. Now, some of this could be because we're trying to up how much we're paid by our organisations. Have I just lost half the room? No. No, I'm sure it's not you guys. I'm sure you're the good guys. We're the good guys, and we're trying to do the right thing for our client. But ultimately, we want to get to a situation today where you've got something you can take back and action in your business straight away. Who knows what this is a scene from? Oh, your data guy. Surely someone must know. Glenn Watson in the corner. The Matrix, Glenn, thank you. He wasn't a plant at all. He just happened to be sitting in the corner. It's the Matrix, and there's a scene in the Matrix where the creator of the Matrix. Any bonus points for who can remember who the creator of the Matrix was? It was the architect. Points here at the front. The architect explains what the Matrix is for the first time. And you know, for those of you who've seen it, and if you haven't, you really should go and see it. those who've seen that scene, you just sit there going, what the hell is he talking about? I've absolutely no idea. And I think that's the situation that a lot of businesses are in around big data at the moment. They know it's there, they know it's swirling around the business, but they're not entirely sure 100% what they should be doing with it and what action to take. So, as I said, I want us to get to a situation today, after all the conversations we've had and the questions you've had to ask, and the unbelievable experts actually that we've got coming on later, to go away and actually have something you can action when you get back to your office. As is often the case with Google, we'll start with a video. So I've shown that video a few times before, a few other events. So the reason why I think it's relevant for today is because it demonstrates how we're leaving crumbs of data everywhere we go. So we're moving from mobile to tablet to desktop. We're moving from home, from office to out and about. And so understanding what the consumer is doing, understanding what frame of mind they're in, understanding what context they're in, so we can actually deliver them the service or the experience or the product or the ad that they actually want at that particular time is becoming more and more challenging. And at the same time, we're in a connected world. You know this. I'm sure you've seen these stats before. If you don't, then please write them down very quickly because you can use them in many presentations in the future. Just to touch on them really, really quickly, 75% smartphone penetration by the end of this year. It will probably go up. It will probably be 80%, and by after Christmas, I expect it to be even higher if any of my daughters and their friends have got anything to do with it, because every single one of them want a smartphone for Christmas. Why that's important is because when people get a smartphone, they search a lot more. And searching a lot more means a lot more data signals coming directly back at you. Secondly, on the right-hand side, 70% 4G coverage in the UK by the end of this year. Again, if people are on 4G, they're consuming a lot more content. A lot more content means a lot more data for you to try and understand, a lot more signals for you to try and understand. And then the one in the middle, 1 in 4 people in the UK have got 3 screens and are moving seamlessly from them every single day, from one screen to another. So, how can you track someone moving from mobile to desktop to tablet? But the kind of the central point of all of this is increasingly the mobile. We recently announced that YouTube, just as a slight aside, has gone to 4 billion views a day. It's an enormous number. It's difficult to kind of get some context on it. A huge amount of data, obviously, for us to try and understand. But the critical thing for me is that 1 billion of that, or 25%, is now on mobile. 1 billion views on mobile every single day on YouTube. So, if you're not on top of how people are actually interacting with mobile, then you're really going to struggle to get to understand what that audience is actually doing. And we're only starting to get to grips with how people are consuming content on mobile, and especially things like YouTube. Are they doing it with their friends? Are they doing it on their own? They're doing it on the bus, outside, at home. and so on. And so, you know, these are all things that are going to help you provide a better service for your customers. And having said that, you know, mobile is actually bringing up new focal points of activity. It's actually developing a whole new strand of ways in which consumers are using them. So, you know, here's just one that we've picked out. There's hundreds and hundreds of these stats that we've got. So if you're interested, please do reach out to your Google rep. 45% of people are researching on their phones when shopping. It's something a behaviour that I'm sure you're all very, very familiar with. But 20% of those are actually changing their mind when they're shopping. So they're in a store, they look at a product, they realise that actually the shopkeeper can't help them at all about that product because they don't know enough about it. They scan the barcode, they get more information on that product, and then they do something else. And it could be that, you know, they buy it there and then on a mobile. It could be that actually they decide to go to the store next door to buy it because they've seen it's more cheap, or it's selling more cheaply. Or they could go back home onto their desktop and purchase it there. So all of this behaviour we know is going on. We used to think, and probably was the case, that it was a pretty much linear journey that people took. So, you know, you researched on your smartphone when you could, and then you purchased on your desktop. Now we're seeing that mixed up the whole time. So people are going from smartphone to desktop to store, back to smartphone to desktop, and so on. And so, you know, understanding those individual points and what information you have to give to your audience in those individual points is absolutely critical. Big data slide, obviously. And again, you know, at worst, you can drop some of these into conversation. Dinner party, that's the kind of fun guy I am if you want to invite me. We talk about zettabytes now. We take a zettabyte for granted. You know, 2 or 3 years ago, no one even heard of a zettabyte. And now, you know, we just chuck out another zettabyte of data whenever we fancy it. We tried to put a bit of context on it on this time. So, you know, the amount of zettabytes created by 2015 is about 1 high-end laptop per person for every person on the planet. Or 63 iPads for every single person on the planet, chocked full of content. Eric Schmidt said recently that the amount of content or the amount of data that we're producing now every 2 days is the same amount as what mankind created from the dawn of civilization to 2003. So the point here is that accelerating. It's getting faster and faster and faster. And so, you know, again, I've said it before and I will keep coming back to it. You're going to hear from some experts later. Just act on one of the things they're doing so you start to get on top of this. You start to understand it better. But I think, you know, we also have to take a bit of a step back because lots and lots of people talk about talking about big data. I'm not sure that's actually what we should be talking about. We should be thinking about, you know, you've all got lots and lots of data in your organizations, but try and understand what are the key bits that are actually going to make a difference to your customer. What are the elements that could actually allow you to understand what they're doing to offer them that better experience that we talked about. And there are some examples of some businesses doing that incredibly well. Netflix been on an enormous tear over the last 12 months. Their stock price is 300% up. It is a phenomenal service. About a year ago, they commissioned House of Cards, which I hope you've seen, because it's a great series. It was the first data-sourced commissioning piece of content ever by any broadcaster. What they did was they actually looked to see which shows were getting the most traction, what kind of stars were most popular, what length of show, how many episodes. Was it drama, was it thriller, and so on, and that's how they actually decided to commission House of Cards. But more recently, they're actually using pockets of data, so a small piece of data really, to try and understand when they launch into a new market what sort of content they should be buying. So the last market that Netflix launched in was the Netherlands. They could have done a number of different things to try and understand what content to buy into the Netherlands. What they decided to do was actually look at BitTorrent sites, so people are legally sharing P2P files. And they looked at which shows were most popular. In the Netherlands case, it was Prison Break. And then they went and bought those shows, and they started streaming them. And, you know, most of us would rather be on the right side of the law. This led to a massive uptick in people taking on Netflix, and also meant that the guys who were creating Prison Break actually get a bit of cash rather than getting ripped off by illegal downloaders. So it's a win-win for everyone. But, you know, they weren't thinking about, we've got all this data, let's think of all of it to make a decision. They said, okay, what's the one bit that we think could be killer to actually make a difference to the way that we launch our business in the Netherlands. Again, this is an example I have used before, but it's about Samsung and their naming convention for the Galaxy S series. So the first two were SII and SIII. The last one, the one that recently came out, was the S4. Now, if you look at Google search trends, completely free, anyone can use it. If you look at people searching for SII or SII, it's pretty much zero. Nobody does. If you look at people searching for S2 or S3, everyone does. And so Samsung obviously looked at that and thought, well, hang on a minute, if this is what the consumer's searching for, why don't we actually make our product match what the consumer is searching for, change our naming convention, and give them something they actually want. It's a really, really simple way of looking at a piece of data, freely available in the market, doesn't take any time at all. Google Trends takes 30 seconds. And British cycling, again, is one of my favourites. British cycling didn't exist 10 years ago. There literally was no professional cycling in the UK because we weren't very good at it. A guy called Dave Brailsford got involved, and what he decided to do was look at every single element of what cycling was delivering at that time and improve all of them. And I think this talks to what we do a bit more readily than some of the examples we've got. So you know, people are using specific types of bikes, they were wearing types of helmets, they were wearing types of clothing. They were taking certain journeys to and from the track, and they looked at every single element of those and thought, could we tweak every single one of these up in performance by a percentage, some kind of percentage, from 0.001 to 0.1 to 1. And by doing that, by adding these marginal gains over and over and over again, they actually became, British cycling became Olympic champions in many, many different cycling disciplines, and then those similar disciplines were taken on to Sky Cycling, who've obviously won 2 back-to-back Tour de France's, the first team and the first British cyclist ever to win Tour de France. So coming from absolutely nowhere, they used data. The cyclists didn't really change, but they used data to provide the cyclists the kind of the ideas and motivation to actually become better at what they were doing. And this, you know, but this is also getting more complex. As you probably can see, I'm wearing a Google Glass at the moment. Google Glass is like, you know, sort of the first step for Google into wearable tech. The point of wearable tech is that it's constantly streaming you, it's constantly analysing you, it's constantly testing or delivering data on what you're doing. So in theory, and this doesn't do it right now, but in theory this could be constantly looking at what I'm looking at, where I am, which websites I'm searching, what I'm asking for, who I'm talking to, and so on and so on. And so it's creating all of these different data signals. The original idea behind this, by the way, is to actually take technology out of the way to make it easier for us to actually live our day-to-day lives. And I think, you know, without getting too cheesy on a linear link, this is what we're trying to do today. You know, technology is often a problem. It's not always the solution. We're trying to take it away with this. And I think on the data side, you know, we've got so much of it now, it can be a problem. And so the point of today is to give you some tools which actually help you make sense of it, so it becomes easier for you to work through. And this all kind of stems from us wanting to document every kind of inch of our lives, to record every single thing that we do. This is the narrative clip. I don't know if anyone's seen this. It's the latest product, or one of the latest products on Kickstarter. The narrative clip actually is a tiny little camera, which you can see on the bottom right of those 3 things there. It's only one of them that you buy. You clip it onto your pocket, and it takes a photo every second and stores it automatically in the cloud. Every single second of your life gets documented. That's a lot of data, and that's essentially what you're paying for. The camera costs virtually nothing. It's the cloud storage that you're actually paying for. But the point is that, you know, this kind of need for people to document everything that they're doing, in many senses is good, because it means that, you know, we've got a lot of data to play with, but in many senses is bad because it becomes more complex to actually try and understand exactly what our customers are telling us. And at the same time, consumers are becoming a bit more savvy about the fact that they're leaving all these crumbs of themselves all over the place. So this is the Nime. Anyone come across the Nime before? Again, it's a relatively new product. We've recently seen security on phones and so on done by fingerprint, but you can actually leave fingerprints everywhere. So, you know, arguably there is a security concern there and a privacy concern there. What the Nime does, it actually uses your ECG, your electrical heart activity, to secure any device that you've got. And so, you know, whilst I'm talking much more about privacy here, I think, you know, the kind of the understanding that the data that individuals have is actually something valuable and is something they need to protect is becoming more and more prevalent. And so, if that's the case, how do we encourage our consumers to actually want to give them our data? I think the critical thing is that we've got to give them something back. It's like an information exchange. We've got to give them some value so they actually feel they want to give us some elements of data. And I think, on a very basic level, we've seen this with Facebook, for example. Facebook, I think, is a really good example of where the consumer enters into a contract with the brand, and they know that they are offering up small pieces of their data in exchange for a phenomenal service. I think Nike do this unbelievably well. I'm a runner. And before I kind of entered into the Nike ecosystem, and it is without question an ecosystem, I just used to buy some kit and I went out for a run. And I didn't really know how fast I was going or how well I was doing, if I was improving. I didn't know when to change my shoes, what clothes I should be wearing. Nike have absolutely transformed that for me. They've changed the way that I look at my run because they've introduced the Fuel Band and the Nike Plus GPS watch and this phenomenal dashboard called Connect. I don't work for Nike, by the way, I'm a Googler. But it really is fantastic. If you are a sports person, then you should get involved. So what they do is they track every single element of what you're doing. So with the Fuel Band, it's everything that you do, and the Fuel Band is connecting regularly with your mobile device every single day. With Nike GPS watch, it's tracking your runs and telling you whether you've done better or worse than last time. All of this is uploaded into a dashboard, Connect, which Nike obviously have access to. And there are a number of different things they're starting to do with this. I mean, one is just to tell you that you're doing a great job. So every single time you break a new personal record, they give you a well done, Matt. You've just broken a new personal record, which is nice. But things they're doing, things they're looking at doing now. So if you're a runner, you know that you should change your running shoes every 500 miles. So, for example, on Nike Connect, they ask you to put in what shoe you're running with and when you got it. And so after 450 miles, they can actually say your shoes are about to wear out. Here are some new ones. And then they can ask you, questions about, were you injured? How did you find them? Were they comfortable? And so they can recommend a better pair of shoes if maybe you are getting injured, maybe ones with better stability. They can also see, without you doing anything, what time of day you're running. So you're running during the day, at night, in the morning. And so, if you're doing more of your runs in the dark, maybe offer you some reflective clothing. And so all of this adds a value to me. Nike have got loads of data, and they get the opportunity to sell me stuff, but it also adds loads and loads of value to me because they're actually offering me a much more personal service. And it can help them as well in understanding different demographics. Are men of my age in the South running certain distances, and therefore do we need to develop certain products for them as opposed to women in the North? And so I think, what is it that you can offer your consumers that actually makes them want to give you this information about themselves? Because if you can deepen the relationship, if you can move from being a push to a customer-centric company like Nike have, and actually offer this information exchange, and you can be in a much stronger position. And so, as I said, ultimately, it's not about necessarily looking at for your customer in big data. It's taking chunks of what you've got and actually using that to make better decisions. Because essentially it's just about trying to understand who your customer is. And going back to Nike, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to understand who I am, what I wear, what I like to do, where I like to run, how I'm running, and so on. And with this guy here and with any of your consumers, it's exactly the same as what we're trying to do. We just want to know more about them so we can offer them a better experience. And I think at Google, probably going to hear some more about this later on, but we kind of chunk this into 3 different areas. The first one is just collect those signals, try and understand, who they are, and that can be done from site traffic, from searches, from ad clicks, and so on. Many different ways of doing it. The second one is to segment them, so move them into different parts depending on which demographic you want to target. So you can start to think about offering a different experience from men my age to women my daughter's age, for the sake of argument. And the third one is engage with them. So start testing those new theories. Start running slightly different product experiences with them, or running different ads to them, or sending them different messages or different emails, and see how they respond. Because you might be surprised they might respond in a really sensible way. And I think over and above everything else, there is a lot to take in here, and you're going to hear, as I said, from a lot of experts in a second. But the critical thing is to get to do something when you leave here today. This is a quote from Agatha Christie, and I'll leave it with you because I think it really sums up pretty much everything that we've got going on here. Loads of complexity. It's very difficult to know what to do next, but I would urge you that the best way to get ahead is to get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. The questions online at #futureofdata were, Matt, please, can I get a pair of glass? So I think we can do better than that later on. I'd imagine the answer is no. But I think we can do a little bit better than that. And I think there were some really good insights that Matt mentioned around taking data and gaining insight from that. One interesting story I heard recently was, do you remember that kind of really bad band Feeder from Wales? So Feeder used Google Analytics while they were touring the States to figure out that there was somewhere in Arizona where they had loads of people watching their videos. So they went to their tour manager and said, here, we've got a massive fan base in this mad place in Arizona. We need to go there. And as a result, changed their tour, went down there, sold out, and had, used data to gain an insight to actually cause an action and deliver something. So that's a quick little insight with using data to gain insight. Next up, we have Oliver talking about spanning the divides.
Thank you. Thanks for the applause. So I'm Oliver Baum. I'm head of advanced performance, which is sort of a mysterious job title, I understand. And but we basically work with two teams in Google, which is product management. It's a vast organization working with many engineers on great products, both for consumers and for advertisers. And we work with sales and marketing for you to sort of make the most out of our advertising products. So I will talk about products a lot. This is a Google presentation, and that's what we do. But when we talk about product, we really start with the consumer usually, and we try and solve a problem. So let's start with the consumer journey and then get to data, maybe where we came from with data, particularly how we measure online, where we are at the moment, and where we think we're going with the industry. So let's watch a video. Oh, thank you very much. So this was a video about the current consumer, and it's a little bit stylized, and it shows off a lot of Google products, which I appreciate. But it shows us one thing very clearly, and that's what we do with the internet is really changing, right? So the internet started, and we'll talk about the past a little bit, started really as an information dump, right? And you were looking for information, you were querying with other search engines before we started just to look for information. You did this usually stationary, sort of at a desk, at a machine, which was either at home or maybe at work. I did a little bit of browsing with there, and that was your interaction with it. So what's happened with the web, of course, is that we now use it for all sorts of different things. We use it to shop, we use it to entertain ourselves, communicate with friends, share data, do all sorts of things, and we do all these things on many different devices in many different situations, on the go, at home, so on and so forth. But what we used to track that, basically is twofold. We either have consumer research, so this has been going on for a very long time, and we do a lot of these studies. Here's an Ipsos study, for example, where we just simply ask consumers what they do, and we work out how they use the web, right? So we now know, and if you come to many Google presentations, you would have heard this many, many times, and Matt mentioned it too. Some people move between devices, so they don't sit in front of a box anymore and then switch it off and go home and may switch on their own box. They now have little devices that they carry around and do things with. And we also know that obviously the internet isn't totally unrelated to the world, right? So we do actually research product purchases, for example, online and then walk into shops and buy them. This is all fairly obvious stuff. And wherever you look, you'll find these numbers. Well, the one place where you don't find these numbers usually is in your analytics tool, right? Because we use something called the cookie, which is our primary way of tracking things online. And the cookie was invented in 1994. I read up on this actually by Netscape, which was sort of the powerhouse of the early internet generation. And it was meant really just to make the internet work. So if you wanted to check out on a website with a product, for example, this cookie would be just a number associated with your browser, remembered what you put in your shopping cart, and then later on it could sort of take that information again and make you pay for it. Something very, very simple. It was actually sold to a guy called Vint Cerf, if you've heard of him, which has a slightly ironic name. And Vint is an older gentleman. He actually has an office on this floor. So he was the first customer of the cookie. And you spot him because he wears a tie, which is extremely unusual in Google. So he sort of turns heads. I think there are 2 people who wear ties, if I remember correctly. So the cookie's been around for 2 decades, and it's literally how we measure the entire internet, right? All of your advertising essentially drops a cookie on your user's machine. We then see them again on the website. We may see them again sort of a little bit later on. They purchase something. We say, aha, it was that person who clicked on an ad. Cookies are great for that, but they're also a little bit oldish, if I may say that. So I've been around for a long time. We made some decisions saying your purchase history is about 30 days. So once we've dropped the cookie, you have about 30 days to convert. We didn't really think about that. Some people may do this really quickly. Some people may take forever to buy something. This is much more expensive, so on and so forth. And we also drop these cookies on browsers, right, not people. So should your sort of partner log into your machine, it looks like the same person. Should you delete your cookies, they're gone forever. Should you upgrade your browser, they're gone forever. So less optimal, really. And then the cookie doesn't really know what goes on offline, right? So it can only tell you what happens on the computer. It's still the best thing we have. It's used en masse. We don't see it going away. But can't we be a little bit more clever about what we actually do with these cookies? So how do we build on this success, really? And if we attack this at Google, basically thinking through what the actual challenge is that we're trying to solve. And if we go back to this consumer research, we sort of solved 2 challenges. The one is of cross-device browsing. So we've dropped a cookie on one device. You then come back on another one, make a purchase or do some research. And we can't actually tell you're the same person, right? You just look like 2 people. So how might we solve that? Here's a little bit further proof that this is happening through an Ipsos study. The figures look a little high here, but we basically asked about 1,500 people in the US where they start their journeys, where they start doing stuff, and where they then move on to. So this is sort of self-reported. And you'll find that the majority in this data set, again, is US data, quite advanced, started on a smartphone and then moved on to other computers. And that these journeys tended to end on PCs or laptops, and really they're laptops now. If you look at your analytics data, you'll find nobody ever sits in front of big boxes anymore, right? We're really talking laptop when we talk desktop. So can we augment the cookie in any way to basically do something good with this information? And just last week, we launched our first product, the first thing we've done in this respect. And it's an AdWords product that tries to link between these different device purchases. So the way we augmented it is actually that we have login data for our users, right? In order to make Google products more useful for you, YouTube, Gmail, so on and so forth, we want to work out that it's actually you who's accessing it in terms of Gmail. We want to be able to give you more personalized experiences on our tools because we think that'll work much better than just giving everybody the same stuff. So once you've logged in to one of our services, basically, we have that as a node. If you then click on one device, we do drop a cookie, so the cookie isn't dead yet. And we know that you've clicked on a Google ad, right? If you come back on another device, if you click on another ad, we'll simply know that you've clicked on an ad and everything is good. But if you don't do that, if you come, let's say, organically by just clicking on a sort of organic search result, we can't really follow that. Well, yes, now we can. And that's by looking at your login data. We know you came on one device, you're logged in on both, and we can move that back to the initial click, right? So that's obviously a subset, and you'll say that's all totally biased because only certain people sort of log into Google products. And in that case, we employ some statisticians to actually extrapolate to the population. So we know that's a skewed sample, and we correct for a couple of factors, and we'll tell you what we think is your estimated total number of conversions that the ad actually generated. It's using cookie data, embellishing it with login data. It's totally aggregate. We have no idea who you actually are. We don't have individual names in our database, but we can make the connection that something happened. And you can then bid and optimize against that. So coming to the second challenge, and this sounds a little bit more daunting, is that people do things offline, right? After they've interacted with your website or clicked on one of your ads. And what do we do in that case? Well, for years, we did a lot of heavy lifting, basically. And there are a number of ways of doing this, repeated about 50 or 60 times in individual studies. So think about the ways you can do this, basically. If somebody clicks on an ad, how do we know that they did something in the offline world? Well, one way is giving them a coupon, right? So you could issue something with a number that's specific to that coupon. They then take that coupon into a store, they hand it in, we scan it, and we know that the number converted, right? So this was an online visit that then converted into an offline sale. It's relatively cumbersome because you have to accept these coupons, you have to tell people to take them, you have to store them somewhere, you need the data collection mechanism, but it's possible. And you've seen, you see some uplifts down there. You can do econometrics modeling, yeah, you can just take series of your website visits, try and correlate them to something that happened offline, so on and so forth. And no matter which of these we used, we kind of came up with the same numbers until we were relatively certain that these were the ones to look out for. We find that there's definitely an effect, which is probably not much of a surprise to you, that people who look at things online actually do stuff offline. So can't we do something more clever, basically, rather than going through this piecemeal exercise and make it work for everybody? And here's a relatively simple solution, something we launched a couple of weeks ago. Well, why don't we just take all that offline data and we just load it back into the system? Yeah, we'll just ask you for it and you give it to us, basically. Relatively simple. So the way that works, we call it AdWords conversion import, I think. We're very good at finding motivating product names right now. They're normally called exactly what they do. So you take your conversions and you import them into AdWords. Basically, when you first click on an AdWords click, we give you a number. Yeah, so you get a click ID that we know who you are. We don't know exactly who you are, but we know that you're the person who clicked on that ad at that time. And let's use a lead gen example. That's what's used here. So somebody comes to a form, for example, and they fill in their name, their details, and they say, give me a call back. I want to discuss this. I'm not entirely sure whether I want to purchase this straight away. So with the lead gen form, you would normally send the first name, the surname, a telephone number, so on and so forth, to your CRM system, and you would then have a lead in there. And all we do here is we also send the click ID to the CRM system. So this is kind of pointless to the person who picks up the lead, but it sits there in the back end of the system. So you now meet this customer over the phone. You could meet them for a business lunch, whatever it is. You sign the contract somehow. And you go into your lead system, which everybody uses, and you just change the lead to converted. Yeah, was an open lead that had to be dealt with, was then a lead that had to be chased up, is then a converted lead. And you can put the value in if you like. You can say this was worth £500. So all we then do is take a data dump from your CRM system, you put that in an Excel file, and you load it back up into AdWords. And you say, against that click ID, which we know happened on the 10th of October at 11 in the morning, 3 weeks later, we actually had a sale, and that was a sale for £500. And AdWords can then optimize against that signal. Yeah? So relatively simple, relatively stupid, already a lot more clever than what we were able to do with cookies beforehand. But we're taking this further, really, and this is in our main analytics suite, which touches really on all of the various Google products. So as you're aware, we really have different measurement silos in virtually any organization out there, and Google's no exception, right? We kind of measure the mobile site, we measure the website, classic analytics tools. We may measure our app if we have one, right? We may do this very rudimentarily, just look at downloads or something. We may be more clever and actually track actions and things, which you can do with Google Analytics now. But then we have customer files, right? That sits somewhere else. Then we have point of sales data, so on and so forth. And none of this really collects. And what we announced almost a year ago now, which is rolling out bit by bit, is a number of technologies, is called Google Analytics Universal Analytics. And what we're doing with that is really letting you collect data from all sorts of sources. So you're no longer bound to websites. Analytics tools were always bound to websites. They were always on browsers. They didn't really work well with mobile sites. Universal Analytics now gives you a great developer kit, basically, to track mobile sites a lot better in detail. But it also allows you to do something very fundamentally different to what other analytics tools do. And that is basically take anything that is digitally enabled, that can send a digital signal, and let it send data into Google Analytics if you wanted to. So if you think about it, you're a games developer or something, you want to measure interactions with your games when people actually play them on the console. Well, you know what they do within the game. If you do, if there's a connection, you can send these actions back into the analytics tool. You could track smart TV, all sorts of household appliances. You can take point of sale data, which is exactly the challenge we were discussing earlier, right? And you can send this back into analytics. So it sounds quite grand, but what would you actually do with it? And we get asked this question a lot. We're sort of at the beginning of this. We've given you the protocol. It's sort of up to you to do whatever you'd like with it. But one of the nice applications, and when we look for really, really good applications, we tend to look at our GACPs. So they're Google Analytics certified partners. They're the people who really, they've been sort of signed off by Google to know a lot about the tool, and they do really know it inside out. And there's a wonderful thing online if you want to have a look. It's called, I think, Tying Caffeine to Productivity. And I couldn't show the video because it's sort of advertising for the company. And it's a little bit long, but I'd urge you to check it out. And this is a bunch of guys who basically connected up their office and tied it back into GA, and were looking whether they're working more productively on coffee. So the first thing they did was go off to their local sort of Maplins, and they bought a bunch of electronics, a couple of sensors, RFID tags, and they tagged up their coffee machine. This is the first thing, right? So they had two options on the coffee machine. There's a coffee, there's a tea option. And if you wanted one, you basically come with a little RFID chip. So swipe it over coffee, the machine makes a coffee, and an event gets recorded in GA. Yeah, that's all it is. It's an electronic signal. It gets sent into GA. On the other side, you can swipe a tea, so you get a tea event in GA. And we can start seeing coffee and tea consumption. They did all sorts of things, some useful, some not so useful, like tagging their fridge up. But then they tied all their systems against it. So they said, we're a small consulting firm, we bill hours, right? We get paid on basically how many hours we can charge to a client. So why don't we send how many hours we're billing to the client into GA, right? And we can just see whether we bill more hours as we drink more coffee, basically. What else? Code pushes. So we write code for our customers, and we then push it to their websites. Every time a code push happens, we'll send that into GA. And they could see these pop coming in as events. And you can then start correlating these data series and getting insights into your customers. So nothing here has anything to do with the website, right? We're tagging up machines, we're tagging up other electronic systems to send data into GA, which we think is revolutionary. If you now go into Google Analytics, you get this as an option. You can choose old code or new code. We hope to be fully compatible on all the features very soon, and then we'll move everybody onto that. So it is truly the future of GA. It's something we'll give to everybody in a free tool. That sounds complicated, so I just had another slide. And I know the GA team is here, so they might correct me. I may have gotten the syntax wrong, but it's not much more complicated than this. It's simply a call that you send into GA, right? So if you think about, if you opened up a browser, you could put this address in and hit send, and that would basically just send a hit into GA, much like a website would do at the moment, right? But this is an offline hit. And all we've done is a very simple, we need to give it an address, so where's it actually sending the data to? That's my account. And then we give it a couple of variables. In this case, it's just an event. If you think about it, as much as calling up a website, as clicking on a button on a website, it's an event for GA. We call that a coffee machine category 1, and we may have one for the fridge and the billing system and something else. And we tell it what type of event happened. So somebody ordered a coffee. And if you look at real-time Google Analytics, you'll then see this event pop up in the tool, and that's all it is. So it's relatively simple. We've given you the measurement opportunity. It's there in the tool. You can try it out. And it's really a question of what you want to do with it. So in the future, we're away from websites. You can now tag interactions much, much beyond that. What will you use it for? And that's it, really. I'm happy to take some questions.
Yeah, so we've got one question here.
Yeah.
So thanks for using the hashtag, guys. Brian asked a question saying, do you capture the click ID on your website?
Me personally?
No, yes, you personally. I mean, first of all, and then second of all, do at Google, I presume.
Do we at Google?
Capture the click ID.
That depends on what you'd like to do with it. I'm certain we do track it. If you've put this needs a little bit of rewriting of the code, basically, the AdWords tool that I showed.
Okay.
We then capture the click ID. It's not revealed anywhere in the system, so you can't actually see it in AdWords. It's purely used for that lead. Okay,
great. And we will ask these questions to the panelists as well later on, so thanks very much for using that. Thanks very much for
Thank you.
I'll take the clicker off.
Cheers.
Cheers. So what's interesting is that 70% of you guys said that you do not use cross-device tracking in your attribution modeling at the moment. And Oliver's run through 3 or 4 products there that give you that opportunity. So I think that's a very, very interesting and very clear point to make. Next up, we have Clancy Childs, who I'm really happy to welcome to the stage. He's just off the plane from the Google Analytics Summit in Mountain View last week. So if everyone can welcome Clancy to the stage. Thanks, mate.
Thank you. So I'm a product manager on Google Analytics. I spend 3 weeks a month here in London. The other week they send me out to California. So I'm in a constant state of jet lag. But we're talking about big data. Let's open up. Before we start talking about the future of data, let's talk about the past, because that's always fun. Bletchley Park, 1943. So that's Colossus, the world's first programmable computer, built to decipher Lorenz ciphers during World War II by Tommy Flowers. This thing cranked out at about 5.6 megahertz. That was its effective processing speed. Now you think that helped win World War II, and we all have laptops and tablets and phones that have a lot more processing power. We mainly use them to look at cat videos. So we've come a little ways in processing power, and this is my favorite. This is my favorite down here. This is the IBM Disk Store 350. This was available in 1950. 5 megabytes of storage. Yours only for $3,200 a month leasing. That didn't include shipping. And I did the math. If you put this on a 747 and sent it from New York to London, you get about, if that flight took about 6 hours, you get about 1.6 kilobits per second data transfer rate. So not the best start to big data. And I think more often, and actually, has anybody been to Bletchley Park? They have all these things in the Computer History Museum there. No? Okay, it's a great place to go see. They actually had to rebuild Colossus because after World War II, they destroyed the whole thing. So actually, a father of a Googler rebuilt the whole thing just by looking at photos like this and figuring out how it works. It's fascinating to go see. Probably not best for running attribution modeling through. But this is not what we think about. We actually more think about the big data that we have now. And this picture is sometimes, I've seen this picture used a lot in a lot of different presentations because it's a pretty stock photo of a data center, a Google data center. But actually, interesting thing about this particular photo is that this was taken in one of our Google data centers. This one, it was in Council Bluffs, Iowa, which up until recently was one of the few data centers that actually was processing Google Analytics data. So believe it or not, even if you haven't been to Bletchley Park, if you're using Google Analytics, at some point you've probably virtually been in this room. This is actually down here. This is your multi-channel funnels data sitting on that rack. But all of this is useless. All this infrastructure, it's all nice. It's great. We get to build big data centers and put a lot of data through them. But it's absolutely pointless if there's nobody actually looking at it, nobody actually taking this data and turning it into actual insights that actually help businesses. And this is why what we focus on, and especially as we plan for sort of our 2014 launches and our recent launches in Google Analytics, we're really focusing on what is it that the analyst or the user or the business needs to do. And they shouldn't care about data infrastructure. They should be caring about the data opportunity. And I just want to quickly mention that, it used to be maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, you'd talk to people about things like Google Analytics, and we'd go talk to businesses and hear what they were trying to do about data and about getting all this stuff up and running. And they would have teams focusing on doing things like putting JavaScript tags on sites. There's all this focus, like 80% of the work was focused on actually instrumenting the measurement rather than actually looking into what it was saying, what this data was saying. And we're actually going back, unfortunately, into the same mode with big data. So now I talk to some of these companies, and they're looking at larger data sets, but they're spending a lot of time focusing on the plumbing, focusing on data centers, on how to get these map reduces running, to crunch data, to put it into something, and then analyze it through Tableau. So if my estimate would be is that we're seeing sort of 80% of activity focused on the engineering and the plumbing, and 20% actually focused on doing anything useful that will generate any sort of insight to the business. And the hope is that we'll see this happen similar to sort of JavaScript tagging, to sort of switch sides. We want to see 80% of human use of data actually being on the analysis, not on figuring out how to get it from point A to point B. So we're breaking up what people need to do or what businesses need to do into sort of 3 easy to understand segments. So what are analysts doing? They care about the access to data. First, you need to actually get the data, and you have to access it. You have to be able to touch all this different data at once. Then, more importantly, you get to this empowerment stage. This is where you're actually saying, okay, we have the data, we're collecting it. Now, what can we actually do to enrich it and to actually get some insights out of it, to start making some decisions on it? But the real sort of nirvana state is action. And this is where actually it all means something. This is where you're actually saying we have this data, we've looked at it, and now we want to actually automate this data into a way that it's automatically actionable. And I'll go into all 3 of these, starting with the access. So Oliver just sort of just went through a bunch of the things we're working on, especially with universal analytics and cross-device measurement. So one of the multiple stats that you'll be thrown at today, 90% of users use multiple screens to complete a task online. So we know that this is a major step. 98% of users jump between mobile to a laptop or a PC in a single day. So there's a whole step here that whether or not you're actually instrumenting those, you have to figure out what are all those touch points that people are using. And I'm sure that most of us in this room have some idea of how your users interact with your brands online. But the question becomes not only what are your touch points, which can now be measured with Google Analytics, so you can get tagging on all sorts of these devices, as Oliver mentioned. But then the next part becomes how do these touch points actually interact? And this is the key bit, right? This is getting past sort of the just getting tags on things. This is actually, let's integrate this data with what we know about our users. So how we're looking at this is in universal analytics, we have a concept called the user ID. And the user ID is basically a way for you to pass through an identifier about that user based on your own, for instance, CRM information. And the first question that's going to come up, actually, I think it already came up in the questionnaire sent out beforehand, is it's not always easy to get people to log in. And as Oliver mentioned, we've been spending a lot of time trying to get users to log into Google because it, first of all, provides them with a better, more personalized experience. But also it helps us understand how our users are actually interacting with different devices. So the question becomes for you is how can we start thinking about getting and incentivizing our users to log in across our several touch points? So a lot of you may already be doing this, or you can see it in things like, for instance, having logins to track or capture a basket. So somebody comes on the website on their mobile phone and they look around and they're like, I would like to buy that, but I don't have time to do that, or I can't figure out how to put in my credit card number on a mobile phone. So what I'd like to do is actually connect to a federated login service like Google+, for instance, and say, let's save this basket so I can come back online on my desktop and go and actually see that same basket and convert there. It's giving users not a forced reason to log in, but a reason that actually improves their experience so they can get done what they want to get done without having to pass around cookies between different devices, which they're not going to do for you. So this would be my first major tip, is that if you want to do cross-device measurement and you want to stitch these users together, you have to start thinking about what can we do to incentivize users and get creative on how we're going to get these users to identify themselves on these different devices. So the hope is, in the future, is once we get that kind of information in there, we can actually start crunching that data in Google Analytics and providing you information like what are the overlaps of different devices that your users are using. This can definitely help you understand exactly what devices you need to optimize for instance. Maybe you're going to see things like, for instance, that you might have, this might be a bit skewed, but you might have a bunch of users that start off on mobile, but then later come on and convert via their desktop. And in that case, what you might realize is maybe you don't have a lot of conversions related to mobile, but you have a lot of assisted conversions related to mobile. This is the kind of information that we want to get in front of our users so that they can actually start thinking about what is it that we need to do as a business to actually optimize our conversions across devices. So access, that's sort of technical stuff. Now the empowerments. Now when we look at empowering our users and when we sit down and we say, our Google Analytics clients, how can we best get them to, first of all, get into the data, access the data, but get to insights quickly? And what we've realized is a lot of that relies on, first of all, segmentation. So segmentation should not be a new concept to anybody in this room, hopefully. But we do know that it's something that in the past we've been a bit weak on in Google Analytics. Because Google Analytics used to only think about segmentation in terms of sessions. So looking at each session, each visit, as though they were a separate person and be able to segment those out. So which segment, a segment that says which sessions do users convert on, or which sessions have a page view of this particular product. But then you're actually just looking at kind of a sparse set of what those sessions were doing. Where really, it's about user segmentation. This is what it's always been about since database marketing, since any sort of B2B marketing. You care about, or B2C marketing, you care about what are your actual users doing. And that means you need to segment by users. So we've now made available to all Google Analytics clients what we refer to as unified segments. And it has a nice little new front end for it compared to the old segmentation patterns. But also what it has is the ability to actually build segments around users. So saying things like, I want to see a segment of all my users that first came to the site via this traffic source, for instance, but then later on a subsequent visit converted and bought this particular product. So it's stretching the idea of segmentation in Google Analytics around users rather than just those individual segments, visits, which is extremely important for analysts who are trying to figure out, for instance, their micro-segmentation or their CRM strategies around how they're going to target individual users. We've also brought in more data. So a major part of empowering users is to make sure that as much data that they need to be able to analyze and segment on is available within Google Analytics. So we've just launched, we just announced last week, the ability to get the demographic data for visitors to your site. So a lot of this comes through information that Google has. It's thresholded and aggregated, so we're very aware of some privacy concerns people may have. So this is why it's like an aggregated view of, for instance, what age groups your users fell into. We also have the gender of your users, so you can actually look at what is my split between male and female. And we also have the interest-based categories, so information saying, these are the number of users who are interested in, I don't know, online gaming or water sports or whatever. All that information is now available in Google Analytics. For our DoubleClick users, we're now also making available for Google Analytics Premium users who are using DoubleClick. The DoubleClick Campaign Manager integration is now available. So if you're using DoubleClick, you can actually get information like your view through conversions and your conversions based on DoubleClick tagging. So you're able to actually see in things, and we're bringing this on into multi-channel funnels, the ability to see this user actually also had this particular DoubleClick ad impression, display impression online. So if you are a Google Analytics Premium client, talk to your account manager if you have DoubleClick, and we can get this turned on soon. And finally, another bit of data that we've added to Google Analytics in the past few weeks is for Google Play. So if you have a mobile app that you have tagged up with the Google Analytics mobile apps SDKs, the Android SDK, we now have the ability for you to tie your Google Analytics account back to Google Play. So this means that you actually get data that shows you how users found your app. So whether it's sort of the marketing that you do on your site to get them to to go download the app, whether they're doing organic Google searches and finding it, whether they're just searching through other referral sites like AppBrain, and then you can actually see where in the process before they download the app are they actually either falling off. So Is it that people come and they see the Play Store information about the app, and then not very many of them install? Is there something wrong with what you're describing on the Play Store? Do you need to focus on that, for instance? And then the whole Google Analytics SDKs for iOS and Android can be used to further track these users back on to how they're actually using the app as well. But the most important part of empowering users to correctly use Google Analytics for us is actually the education piece. And we've had things like the Google Analytics IQ. What does it stand for? I can't remember. GAIQ. We've had that for a long time. I'm going to admit to you that's a bit out of date, and sorry about that. We've been focusing on what we've just launched on October 8th, and you can get on it now, is our massively open online course, which is called Analytics Academy. So this was designed by Justin Catroni, who has been a long upstanding member of the analytics community. He joined Google about a year ago. He's been working on designing this online course. It started on the 8th. It is very much kind of an interactive course. So it has components where has anybody done a MOOC before, like Coursera or Udacity? Okay, brilliant. So this is, you basically log in, you register. You could go to analyticsacademy.withgoogle.com. You could register. And what it has is every week or every few weeks, it publishes new courses, which are in terms of lectures being run by educators on Google Analytics, covering specific points of Google Analytics, and then followed by a test. So it's this whole sort of self-taught, but also there's a specific process you go through, and at the end there's the final course, which is the updated GAIQ exam. So this is our first step in trying to get analytics knowledge out to more people and how to actually use this tool. So if you have people in your organization or you yourself feel that there's a lot more that you can learn about all these new features, analyticsacademy.withgoogle.com is the first place to step. So beyond just getting the data there and accessing it and then enriching it, empowering users, the next part is ACT. And this is the step that very few companies I've seen are actually doing anything super exciting with just yet. But this is kind of the next trend that we're really pushing for. And there's two key parts of what we're focusing on in action using Google Analytics. The first being the remarketing from Google Analytics. So your typical conversion funnel on a website, there's just drop-off points at each point. We can see that, for instance, of the people who actually make it to purchase a web from your site, if you have a 4% conversion rate, that's pretty good in a lot of cases. But you have these drop-offs at each point. These are the users that are leaving the site. But the interesting thing is that of these users, the further that they actually drop off from the site, if you remarket to them, you're getting actually a more likely to convert customer, right? Because each point that they've stepped through to the site has shown that they have a higher intent to actually purchase. So if somebody's dropping off from, for instance, the beginning of the checkout process, what that could actually mean is, the doorbell rang, that they left not because of something that you did to piss them off and make them leave. It could actually very well be that they had a very high intent to convert. And we actually know that through some research that we've done, that a lot of these drop-offs are extremely important to go and back to and say, wait, you showed that you were interested in this product. You showed that you were willing to, get the shipping details in, and then you disappeared, and we didn't see you convert. So analytics has been focusing on pulling in the remarketing on the GDN into Google Analytics. So you can build segments in Google Analytics that specifically say, I want to see users that match these profiles, but also had this type of behavior on the website. And we want to show those users in AdWords a specific creative, inviting them back to the site. Now, this has been actually in Google Analytics for a little while now. One of the things and some of the things that we're working on in future iterations of this include things like dynamic remarketing. So rather than having to build all of your data, all of your segments for each product, for instance, on your site, you can actually upload your Google Merchant Center feed and it will actually pull together the creatives for you based on when those users saw the site. We also have the ability now to build these segments based on dynamic information in the URLs. So a cleverly written regular expression can actually say, this user was looking at this particular page. So that means that if they didn't convert, we want to put them into this remarketing list. There's also some very exciting things that we're working on here that are using some of the machine learning that we use in Google Analytics to actually do the remarketing for you. So to identify which users match or look alike other users that did convert, to calculate a probability of conversion for each of those users, and then for the users that had a high probability of conversion but then left the site, putting them automatically into a list. And this can work with the dynamic remarketing. So these are the things that we're working on in the future around action and remarketing with Google Analytics. But I want to go on to what's my pet project, which has been the top request that we've received for Google Analytics for a very long time from our most sophisticated users. And that is, just give me the raw data. Why can't, we send these pixels to you, we send this data to you, and then you process it and you aggregate it, but then we mainly just get the aggregated responses back. But we actually want to get that raw data that's been processed back in a way that we can use in some of our more sophisticated applications. So we went and spoke to a lot of these users, and when you ask them, what are you trying to do with this raw data, you get these interesting use cases. First of all, most of them want to tie it back to some of their corporate data, like their CRM data, their ERP data, all this information they have about stock levels. And they want to get this data in one place, and then they want to act on it. So they want to do things like run complex ad hoc queries. So the most intensive sort of data analysts and data scientists, they just want to get into the SQL and they just want to write these queries on the raw data. Or they're using tools like Tableau, MicroStrategies, whatever their company's standardized visualization tools. They just want to pull that data into their common dashboards within those companies. Many are running their own data warehouses. They've spent a lot of money on something like Teradata or big MySQL instances, and they already have all their company data within these databases. They're saying, well, you know what? The one thing that's missing is some of our raw Google Analytics data that we want to process into there. And the most exciting, in my opinion, are the companies that are doing this to actually build applications for their users. So the chief one out there right now is sort of the on-site personalization stuff. So a company that has a data warehouse that has CRM data about all of their users, all their logged in users, they also have this information about what those users were doing on the site. So what they want to do is actually process the raw data saying, this user was on the site yesterday, and they looked at this product, and then they left. But we haven't seen that user for the past 3 months. So there's something exciting going on here. This user's back on the site, they logged in, but then they disappeared. So what we actually want to do is when they come back to our site, we want to personalize it for that specific segment. So they're building personalization applications, or using off-the-shelf personalization applications that take that data plus the raw Google Analytics data to say, welcome back to the site. Here's 3 things we think you're going to be interested in, and personalizing that entire experience. Again, this personalization bit goes back to incentivizing users to log in the first place, saying the entire site will be more tuned towards you if you log in, so that we can better understand what you want to see. So we looked at all these these use cases from our clients about what they wanted to do with raw data. And going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, when you sit down with a lot of these companies and you say, okay, let's say I gave you a fire hose of raw data from your site. What are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do? And a lot of them would say, well, we turn it over to the data engineering team, because what they'll have to do is take all this raw data and stitch it back together and process it in a way that we can actually use. So that didn't sound like a really great thing to get people to do right off the bat. So we wanted to balance between having sort of this hit level, session level data in a very raw format. So like the flavor of having this information that's, you can see exactly each hit that a user was doing, but also balance it with making it easy for them to access. So what we kind of figured this out is it's not necessarily providing raw data. It's doing a little bit of processing on our end, stitching things back together. And so I've been referring to it as more like medium rare data, that you're actually kind of getting more of a cooked version of the data, but it still has all that delicious raw flavor in it, for instance. So the solution that we've settled on and what we've launched for all Google Analytics Premium clients is having Google Analytics Premium data be able to flow directly into Google BigQuery. BigQuery is Google's, it's our big data processing engine. It's actually based on technology we've had internally for several years at Google called Dremel. And BigQuery is basically a cloud-based processing engine, data processing engine, where you can upload whatever data you want into the system. It handles petabytes of data. And Google Analytics data now can actually flow directly in there, so we'll auto-import that for you. You don't have to worry about exporting it and re-importing it. It'll just appear in your BigQuery data. And then you can run SQL-like queries on this, or run API queries on it. So you can actually connect your own systems. There's a bunch of other tools that already interact with this directly. There's a huge third-party ecosystem that are working with BigQuery right now, so that you can actually then get the data that you've processed, run queries on, pull it back out of BigQuery, and put it into any of those use cases you have, whether it's visualization or whether it's just storing the data yourself or running your own applications. It opens up all these possibilities for these data scientists out there who want to get query-level access to the raw data. So we've been testing this for several months now. I originally announced it at Google I/O, and we've had a bunch of our premium clients actually using it. I just want to quickly go through some of the use cases that they've developed for this. And then I'm going to also talk about what some other marketers are doing with this kind of raw level of data, this big query level of data. So eBay Classifieds Group, world's largest online classified. They include things like Gumtree, Kijiji, and Marktplaats. They have all of this other metadata about their pages and how people are actually accessing their site. But they couldn't join that easily with their Google Analytics data. So what they're able to do now is upload into BigQuery information about this page, this URL, actually was related to this information we know about that online classifieds posting. And then the dimensions from that, they're able to then join across to their Google Analytics data and run these ad hoc queries that aggregate on their own business dimensions rather than just on their web analytics dimensions. GoDaddy, the world's #1 domain name registrar, they've been augmenting their customer lifecycle. So they've been spending a lot of time over the past few years understanding what are the key points when a user on their site, what are the key actions that a user completes for them to say, you know, this person has moved from being a potentially, let's say, a potentially profitable customer for us. They've all of a sudden done something, which means that we actually think that their propensity to churn has dropped, right? So we want to make sure that our customer database actually contains that information, that their customer life cycle, they've moved to a different phase in it. So now what they're looking at doing is taking this BigQuery data that says this user has actually completed this hit on a hit level, this visitor has done this thing, process that data and update their customer life cycle information. Very interesting stuff that they're doing. And Zillow, the US property portal, they've actually said, well, you know what, we already have a massive data processing pipeline. We like BigQuery, but we just want to get that raw hit level data. So actually, what they do is the data comes into BigQuery, and they just export it outright as a JSON file. So they download these massive files and upload it into their own MapReduce architecture at Zillow, which they use to, well, for a variety of different reasons, but they do a bunch of different things with that data in their own architecture. So you can still get this raw level of data exported from there. So BigQuery usage beyond Google Analytics. There's a few, two case studies I just want to quickly mention. So Shutterfly, they've been going out and swabbing all of their clients and getting their DNA. No, that's not what this is a picture of. This is actually an image of a single user. All of the times they've uploaded an image and from different cameras. So this user uploaded a few photos from one camera, and then all of a sudden, other cameras started appearing. Probably right around the time some smartphones started being made available, or other cameras you could sort of see as it spreads out. So a single user, I mean, this is a lot of different data points that they have. But what they can actually do with this is they take all this data, they put it into BigQuery, and they actually are able to start doing things like microsegmentation. They're able to say things like, okay, what days are photos being taken? And then build segments within BigQuery saying, what are our users who are the everyday photo journalists, basically, who are taking photos constantly, and they're uploading them constantly? That's one really important segment for us, as opposed to the family holiday segment, people who don't take these photos very often, but when they do, they send a whole batch through. Because how you market to those different users is incredibly different, right? And so this is the kind of insight that they're able to start looking at when they use this data in a big data processing tool like BigQuery. And this is well, I think it speaks for itself, doesn't it? No, this was some work done by a company called Interactions Consumer Experience Marketing. And this is for a retailer in the US. And what they did was they took offline data about in-store purchases and mapped it against other data they had about snowfall in the area. And the reason being is they wanted to understand how could they better predict what sales were going to be in store on certain items based on the weather forecast. Now, there's only a few of these shown here. It's been pretty much anonymized, but what they basically paid to see happen was that when people hear that a storm's coming, they stock up on booze. Yeah, so they paid somebody to tell them that. I would have told them that. But yeah, so it's some really interesting things here, though, of course, that means something for this client. This client actually is able to say not only what happens before a storm, but also start looking at things like what happens after a storm. Can we expect certain items to drop off in sales after a storm? So it helps them better align what they're actually, rather than just looking at like year-on-year data of sales performance, actually looking at year-on-year plus weather, for instance, which is a really important metric for them now. So anyway, that's a quick run-through of some of the things that we've been working on Google Analytics. Again, we're breaking things down to access, empower, and act. And this is really our focus on saying, what is it that users and analysts actually care about? We don't want to fill people's heads with data plumbing and processing and all that stuff. We want to figure out what our users are actually trying to do with these tools. So I'll be around. I'm always interested to hear about, what are you trying to solve, and I think we'll have some time in the panel later for exactly that. But thank you very much. Happy to talk later.
Got a few questions, Clancy. Right. So hang on a second, I got a few questions. So thanks, guys, and thanks for continually posting your questions on #futureofdata. So we really appreciate that. Are demo enhancements in GA only available in premium?
Which ones?
Are demo enhancements, the demo?
So some of them are. So the BigQuery integration is premium only.
Yeah.
And the double-click integration is premium only.
But demographic enhancements are?
Oh, the demographic data will be available to all Google Analytics clients.
Perfect.
I think you will need to do a special version of the tagging to do that, but we have it up on the Help Center.
Okay, cool. There's quite a few questions around cookies, and there's one kind of quite bold question from Gemma saying, the cookie isn't dead yet, so when will it disappear altogether?
So with, the cookie is not dead yet because it is a very important identifier. For Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, one thing we've done is we've reduced our reliance on cookies. So there's now just a single cookie rather than 6 cookies at a single time. It's impossible to say when anybody will move to a cookie-free world because that would have to involve everybody logging in. Cookies are not necessarily a bad thing for privacy. If anything, they're very privacy efficient in the sense that they don't require people to identify themselves to sites. I don't think cookies are ever going to go away entirely. We're reducing our reliance on them where possible, but at the same time, that wasn't much of it.
That's fair, guys. Thank you very much to Clancy again.
Thank you
this morning. That's been a It's been a great morning, right? We had Matt Bush talk about some of the importance of taking insights from data. We had Oliver step up and talk about some of the cross-device tracking products that we have available, which is very interesting given that 70% of you mentioned you do not use cross-device in your attribution modeling. And I thought it was particularly interesting hearing some of the latest launches that Clancy mentioned that he heard in Mountain View last week. There's a million jokes I've been pinged to talk about the cookies you guys are about to eat during this break and the cookies we've been talking about. I'm not going to take that bait, as tempting as it is. But we have 10 minutes now for you guys to take a quick break. As I said at the start, the toilets are behind me. You'll have a Googler standing there to let you back in. Please have a coffee and see you in 10 minutes. Thanks, guys. Guys, can we take our seats? In the next 2 minutes, we'll be starting. Thank you. Sorry, guys. Sorry to interrupt your coffees and cookies. If we can take our seats, we can start back up with the second half of the morning. I get the... Thank you very, very much. Cool. Great, thanks, guys. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed the start of the morning. What we have for the afternoon, we have Farzad and Ben here to talk about database media buys with social signals. Then we have Aidan talking about Google Tag Manager, and a panel where we're going to answer some of the questions that you guys have put to us today, and a few other questions. So keep posting the questions to #futureofdata. We much appreciate it. So just to introduce Ben and Farzad. Farzad's the account director for DoubleClick. Ben is the head of sales for Wildfire, and they're going to talk about database media buys with social signals.
Thanks all. Morning. Pleasure to be here. So my name is Ben Harknett. This is Farzad. So I run the EMEA sales for Wildfire, as Dave said. And today we're going to be exploring a framework for taking a data-centric approach to digital marketing.
Oh, thanks. So let's go. So as Ben mentioned, data is becoming increasingly important. And what we are quite passionate about here at Google is how can we sort of take this deluge of information and this data that's coming our way and actually make meaning of it and act accordingly. And so if we look at some just recent stats in terms of what's going on every second, there are over 32,000 Google searches, 10,000 items on Facebook are getting liked, 9,000 YouTube video views, and 4,000 tweets going out every single second. And so that basically means that every second there's over 50,000 pieces of information being produced. And in just the short time that we've been standing on this stage, you know, that's rapidly approaching 1 million pieces of audience signal and data and information getting posted and shared and created. And so when we talk about audience signals, what do we actually mean? What we mean is that as consumers embrace this sort of digital ecosystem that's being created around us, and they're becoming increasingly digital in their activities, they're leaving behind traces and signals that we can use to infer their demographics, so who they are they male, are they female, are they younger, are they older, and what their interests are, what do they like, what are their, what do they like, what do they dislike, and we can start to infer that information based on what are they searching for, the types of sites that they're visiting, the types of ads that they're viewing, interacting with, clicking on, perhaps, so on and so forth. And as the digital consumers are presented with an ever-increasing number of connected devices, this is just sort of rapidly increasing. And so at their disposal are things like the Nike Fuel Band and the Jawbone Up, which are literally tracking their every single movement. You have things like the Samsung T9000 refrigerator, which is smart enough to keep track of what items you have stored in the fridge and the freezer, what you might need to add to your grocery list, your to-do list, and even going so far as having a webcam on it to keep an eye on your baby for you. And then also sort of like more nascent technologies like our very own Google Glass, which Matt Bush showed off quite nicely earlier, where literally how we interact with the world around us is going to completely change. And so this new breed of devices is essentially going to become more seamlessly embedded in our everyday lives, whereas some of these might seem a bit weird for now. They're becoming much more commonplace. And so with that constant connectivity is also going to come an ever-increasing amount of data and signal, but also a richer quality as well that we can take advantage of. And so if we look at the sort of the frequency of this information, just 5 or 6 years ago in 2007, there were about 2,000 gigabytes of data being produced per second. Just 5 years later, that increased sixfold to 12,000 gigabytes per second. And then by 2017, we're predicting that this is actually going to increase to 37,000 gigabytes per second. And so this is obviously a hard number to sort of understand what it means. And the way that you can sort of understand that is that that's like being shared one picture by 25 million people every second. And so it's enormous. And so what's unique about the internet and this constant connectivity is that it actually affords us this two-way communication with that connected consumer. And so this connection and this ability to have this feedback in real time has a few implications. And so really what it's doing is it's introducing sort of a new dawn in the era of advertising in terms of this feedback loop and the ability to turn audience signals and insight into real-time action. Because it's one thing to collect this information and just have it, but it's a completely different thing to actually act upon it in real time rather than for the next campaign or next week or the next day even. It's really in real time is how are we making use of this data that's at our disposal. It also means that you can start to take information and actually start to address the needs of in-market consumers in real time rather than waiting for them to show up at your shop front, for example. It also means that you can improve efficiency by understanding users who are not in market and dismissing those engagements because they're not as valuable as important to you. And then also perhaps finding new customers that maybe you didn't even know about and perhaps engaging in a conversation with them from scratch and ultimately understanding sort of where they are in that path to purchase. But with these millions of signals, it's like how can you actually harness this information and make use of it in some of these ways that we're talking about? And inevitably, at any Google event, the answer is going to be technology, of course. And so with this technology, there are also a couple of considerations to take into account. So there's a wide range of technologies that allow you to sort of collect information across different channels and touch points like search, display, social, CRM, site behavior with things like Google Analytics, etc. But the challenge is how do you actually join these up to make meaning out of them and ultimately gain that single view of the consumer? Because again, it's nice to have all of this information, but in their individual silos, they're not adding value to each other, and it's making it impossible for you to make meaning of it. And so when you have this sort of single view that's been distilled from all of these disparate sources, you can start to engage with the right people, with the right messages at the right time, and start to act upon the data appropriately. And so we've seen in real-life examples with some of our customers that when they adopt a single platform that enables them to collect information and aggregate it and synthesize it across these different points, that they can not only see up to 33% gain in campaign execution, but also the impact of those campaigns, the effectiveness, the performance improvements are also quite staggering, because they're finally getting to a point where they can take all of this different information, make meaning of it, generate insights, and actually and take action. But despite this, the technology is only going to be as good as sort of the logic that you put behind it, of course. And so with that, we've sort of created this framework of collect, segment, and engage that we'll walk you through over the next 10 or 15 minutes. And talk about how each of these stages are really important to make sure that you're capitalizing not only on the data opportunity, but also on the technology opportunity that's available. And this model isn't too dissimilar from the traditional planning model, but really where the difference kicks in is that, again, the internet allows this to be a real-time feedback loop and a real-time conversation and a real-time delivery mechanism, because we are, again, dealing with that connected consumer. So diving into the collect stage, it's important that with all of the online activity that we're conducting, it's vital that we're sort of collecting signals and harnessing the information across owned, bought, and earned media assets. And so that every time anybody interacts with any of these areas, it's an opportunity to be collecting that information. And the aggregate value of the signals being produced across all three of these different areas is immense. So with owned, the first basic step, and some of our previous speakers and with Aidan following, it's really important to just get, at the very basic level, tagging on your own web properties right. Everybody has challenges in getting tags onto the site and that kind of thing, but we're approaching a time, and some would say we've even passed the time, where that's actually the baseline. It's the expectation. It's a non-negotiable. But then the next step is, how do you actually start to incorporate other information, like CRM, for example? And how do you bridge the divide between offline and online so that you can actually take that offline CRM data, which gives you rich, robust insight into your consumers, into your customers, and actually have that available in the online delivery channel? And so bridging this divide between offline CRM and online delivery really helps you establish that cross-media relationship with your customers, rather than treating them as two completely separate different people and having to re-engage them separately from scratch every single time. And so the opportunity to pass this data back and forth is huge. The next area is in terms of bot media. So again, in the bot media space, every opportunity to interact with a customer or a consumer is a collection opportunity. So every impression served, every click generated, every page viewed, that kind of thing. And so again, one opportunity from paid media is users who are landing on your web properties, and we've just talked about how they can be harnessed. But also the other opportunity is to bridge the sort of the divide and the silo that exists between branding and performance. Typically, those might sit with different teams. They might sit with different budgets. But nonetheless, they are an opportunity to collect signals for your brand, for your business. And so by bringing those two things together, you're able to leverage the data across both. And by having these in a single system, you can use branding insights to power performance, and you can use performance insights to power branding to continually sort of feed that loop and that cycle. And so every ad served, basically on your paid media plans, present you with an opportunity to collect this information, to collect these signals, so that they're not going to waste. And it's also important to be cognizant of the artificial barriers that we put up in these different channels, and making sure that everything that we're doing is working toward bringing these closer together, rather than sort of increasing or heightening the walls that exist between these spaces. I'm going to pass it over to Ben to sort of carry that idea forward in terms of collection with social.
So Wildfire was bought by Google at the end of last summer, and one of the key reasons that DoubleClick bought Wildfire was to get some insight into what's happening in the social space, to understand how our customers are communicating about us, because it's no longer acceptable to not pay attention to that, to not engage customers socially. And so understanding and listening to the earned conversation is vitally important. And it can be important for a couple of reasons. I mean, some of the simple examples that we see very often is listening to sentiment and perhaps adjusting brand message to better resonate with your customers. Some of the stuff that we see listening in the social space, though, as very early stage. We think there's a lot more that can be done. And one of the things that we're investing in at the moment is looking at optimizing your paid, your owned, and your earned media based on what's happening in the social sphere. So, for example, being able to optimize ads that based on the ripple effects that are happening through Facebook, Twitter, G+, etc. So, moving on from the collect phase, we've got all this really interesting data, but our consumers are individuals. We are individuals. We have different interests, likes, dislikes, etc. So if we're communicating with our customers as one population, then we're completely missing the trick. Our customers aren't going to really feel that we know them as an individual. They're going to see us as one big sort of scary corporation, as opposed to perhaps a more local store that has our best interests at heart. So let's take an example of how sort of segmentation can work, and understand that these are all fairly simple concepts, but I think often we forget the basics when sort of looking at digital media. So let's say we're an e-retailer that typically targets women, perhaps 15 to 35, for example. So we want to get new customers. We want to start to remarket to people that are spending perhaps 5 minutes on our site. They've been clicking around different products, but haven't actually made a purchase. So we think, okay, well, let's start to target these guys. Let's do some remarketing. Let's fire some ads at them. But if we looked at that information, we think, okay, well, that's a really interesting customer set. But upon sort of further analysis, we might find that actually, these are men. They're 25 to 34. So is that our customer set? We might decide that actually, gifting's not really where we want to be. We want to target the direct customers. We don't really want to sort of set up our site and so on for men. So let's not spend our money there. Let's spend our money on a different set of demographics that we know is going to yield results. And so, I mean, it sounds quite simple to say that obviously if we understand our customers as individuals and target the right content and so on to them, we're going to get much better results. And this was backed up by a study that Axiom did earlier this year that showed that if we target based on contextual signals, get a 13x uplift, demographic signals 55x uplift, behavioral signals 123x uplift, and if my GCSE maths holds up, that should equal, potentially, if you combined all of them, an uplift of 542x. Now, I mean, obviously, this is going to be different depending on your specific company, but the short version of this story is if we're not targeting our customers as individuals, and I say this not only across paid means, but also across social media and on your website, then we're missing out on a huge opportunity, not only to really connect with our customers, but also these are things that your competitors are obviously thinking about as well. So we've collected this data, we've segmented this data. Now comes the important bit, right? We need to engage these customers. We need to connect with them and in the right way. So what we've talked about so far has been reaching the right people. But if we now need to deliver the right message, and we need to deliver that message at the right time. And what Farzad talked about, and what we've heard from other speakers today, is this massive data. We need to think about data, and we see that data posing two key challenges. One, that those data sources currently are in lots of different places. So how can we pull them together in such a way that we can actually leverage it and leverage it efficiently? And the second piece is, organizationally, how can we set up our company in such a way where what comes out of that data can be put into action very, very quickly and be deployed at the right time? We believe the answer to that question is a single technology stack, a stack of technology that is able to unify those data sets and then allows you to deploy the right pieces of content at the right time to engage with your customers. And we think about that from not only a creative piece, making sure we've got creative optimization on your paid media. But we also think about that in terms of, okay, the content that's working on perhaps paid media and display, how can we make that available? How can we surface that to perhaps the social team? Because let's take a step back and let's say, in that same example that I talked about earlier, if we decide that, you know what, actually we do want to try and connect with the gifting customer. So we therefore need to make sure that we're surfacing the right kind of content through display and making sure that's available to the social team, so that we can optimize on both of those fronts.
Okay. So now that we've gone sort of through the model, I think one of the most important things to note here is it's not a linear process. It's not that this week I'm going to collect, next week I'm going to segment, and the following week or month I'm going to engage. It's this continuous feedback loop. That's this virtuous cycle. So you want to constantly be collecting, segmenting, and engaging in real time, because no longer is it that things change from one campaign to the next campaign to the next campaign. They're literally changing from one ad impression to the next ad impression, and so on and so forth. And so the way that we sort of test this model and ensure that our systems that are in place are able to do this quickly and in a unified manner is to sort of apply an attribution model. So all of the different signals that are coming our way, they're not of equal value. Some will have greater value than others. It may also be dependent on when they happen. They might also differ in value based on what they're in relation to, so other exposures, other interactions with that same customer. And so it's really important, again, that the platform has a unified data set that enables you to do this analysis, to constantly tweak and refine and alter how you are evaluating the information coming your way and how you're ultimately acting upon it as well. So just a few examples if we're doing okay on time. Perfect. So these are just a couple of examples of our customers who have leveraged our platform, specifically DoubleClick, to drive real business results for themselves. So if we look at this luxury retailer, they were able to drive a nearly 80% reduction in their core goal of a brochure request online. And so what they did was, using the power of search, they found out what was the intent of various users. So are they in market for luxury cars? Are they looking for retirement presents? Are they looking for cars over a certain price range? And then also, how are they interacting with their property? So did they spend over 2 minutes on their website? Taking that information and then segmenting it across their core demographic group of men over the age of 45, aligning their content, their advertising, their messaging around not only automotive content but also music content, and then finally engaging them with dynamic creative to reflect back to the previous engagement via search. So is this a user who's expressed interest in a particular model of vehicle? Is it a user who's maybe more open and is just interested in more broadly luxury cars? And using that information again to seamlessly alter the message that was being delivered to pair with that. Another example is a customer in the education sector who drove an over 40% reduction in their cost per lead. And so what they did was they had various programs available as part of their educational courses, but the courses are available only in English, for example. But they do want to attract an international customer base because not only do they offer online programs, but they also want to attract students here to the UK. And so what they did was across 20 global markets, they were able to find a population of users who met the prerequisite criteria, and then finally engage them with the relevant messaging around the courses that they were interested in, acknowledging their location, and acknowledging all of the interests that they had expressed previously, and the information that they maybe had already collected off of the advertiser's website. And then finally, I'll just flick through this. Finally, a telecom customer of ours who was really interested in improving their overall digital loyalty messaging and programs. And so what they did was they looked at their website and they found the population of users who were actively logged into their website. They picked up other signals such as when their contract end date was approaching, what type of plan they were actually on. They leveraged their CRM data to find out what loyalty program they were actually part of, because they did have sort of these ancillary businesses around, sponsorship and shopping programs and that kind of thing. And then for users who weren't actively going to their website, they actually leveraged their newsletter program, so their email marketing, to pull that data in as well. Again, their target demographic was over 18s, male and female alike, just to sort of hit as much of their customer base as possible, again, across the different loyalty schemes. And what they did was, based on the information that they were collecting from the logged in section of their site, the CRM, the email newsletter, they were actually altering their search messaging to reflect the fact that this was an existing customer, not a prospect, to improve that brand loyalty, that brand communication. And also, via display, promoting the specific loyalty schemes that the user was obviously most interested in and would resonate most with them, to encourage them to stay with this particular provider and carry on their sort of their custom with them. So just a few examples of how having all of these signals in sort of one platform allows you to consolidate them, collate them, and ultimately act upon them in real time to drive meaningful business impact for your brand. So that's us, and I guess with that we'll open the floor to any questions. There are any?
There's been kind of pure clarity. Everyone just kind of stating what you've said. So that's a really good thing, right? Cool. Thank you very much, guys. Cool.
Thanks so much.
Great. So one question was put up on, are we going to share these decks with you? Absolutely. And the event's being recorded, so we'll share that with you after the event as well. Thanks so much to the guys. I think it's really interesting to talk about how we can gather all this data and analytics and across-device tracking, and then actually, from an advertising point of view, what's the technology stack to kind of back to cause some action as a result from a media focus. And with Wildfire, there's some really, really fascinating collaboration between DoubleClick and Wildfire, which I'm definitely really enjoying learning about. So we've kind of gone on quite a decent journey today about all the different data houses and all the different things you can do, and there's kind of loads of actions, and potentially you're sitting there going, okay, where do I start? Where in God's name do I start? And I know 70% of you guys said you do have a tag solution, but if you're sitting there wondering, probably the core, most important thing to be able to enable some of the things we've talked about today is to have a tag solution, and we're going to spend a quick time to run through what Google's tag solution is. So Aidan's going to join us now.
Cool. Cheers, Dave. So yeah, I've got 10 measly minutes to talk to you about Google Tag Manager, so thanks very much for that. I'm squeezed between you and the expert panel. So I suppose everything we've been talking about today, I firmly don't believe that the cookie is dead. I think it's still very much alive, and the Google Tag Manager is something that really facilitates that. So I'm going to take you through a short presentation about why I think that is. Actually, this is, go straight through there. So data provides us with huge possibilities as marketeers, right? But I think one thing that data does do is that it complicates things, and it makes marketing very complicated for us. Originally, the way the web worked, you created a website, you found your website, it was discoverable, it was very easy to action that. Users now, consumers now, are far more demanding. Their behavior is far more advanced. They expect to have a personalized service. If they don't get that, then they'll go elsewhere. So I suppose tags puts that kind of power into our hands as marketeers, right? So it allows us to do kind of many of the things that we've been talking to you about today. Things like putting Google Analytics or any other web analytics package on your site. Attribution modeling, making sure that you're spending the right money in the right place. Things like conversion tracking, remarketing. These will resonate with all of you. Probably things that you're doing a lot already on your website. But a big challenge with doing all this is, I guess, number one, time, and also that a lot of the time, if you want to dump a lot of tags into your site in order to do the things that you want it to do, it can be time consuming and it can slow down your site. So, when we speak to our customers about tagging, time and time again they come back to us. Every time Google brings out a new product, we say, you know what, if you really want to do this well, you're going to have to tag up your site. And we get feedback saying, well, I'm working in the marketing department, I don't have access to the website, I don't know how to code, what am I supposed to do? There's also a kind of a conception out there, I guess, that if you do overload your website with tags, then that means that you're really slowing down the performance of that site. And as I said before, the consumer will go elsewhere to find that service and get a better performance from a website. And also that that it slows down your site. So what's the kind of solution for that? I suppose these are three other areas that we like to talk about when we talk about the challenges that you actually that you face when you do tagging. Campaign delays. So if we come to you with a proposition about a campaign that we think would work well for you, it's not very easy to actually get that going straight away. Marketing are not in control of what happens on the website. You want to do something in a week or in a day, it's going to take 6 months for you to actually get that campaign live. If you have to manually code in tags into your website, you have to manually drop those tags in. A lot of the time, that's going to be inaccurately done. You know, a tiny incorrect piece of coding put on your website just means that if you're putting garbage in, you're getting garbage out. So you're not getting the kind of performance out of your tags that you actually need to get. And finally, you know, as marketeers, most of us are not hugely technical, right? So we can't really be dealing with this kind of thing on a day-to-day because we need to be thinking about strategy. We need to be thinking about what channels we should be using to drive customers to our website rather than how the website actually performs itself. So we're kind of in this kind of in-between kind of vicious circle where we just keep going around these three areas. And what Google has in this space is Google Tag Manager, as Dave referenced at the very beginning. And we think this is a really easy solution, an easy, free solution for you guys to use as marketeers, because we've really kind of decomplicated the entire process for you in order to get the best performance out of your tagging on your site. So I'm just going to take you through these 3 points really quickly, just to kind of talk to you about some of the big benefits that we see in GTM and why we think you should be using. It doesn't always have to be GTM, but obviously a tag solution is absolutely crucial in order to make this happen. So how does it work in the first place? Well, you've got one piece of code that you put on your site. That's the GTM code. That will load asynchronously. So instead of having 10, 20, 30 marketing, measurement, all types of tag in your sites that are loading one after the other, slowing down everything, you've got this one tag that loads asynchronously. There's no tags getting in each other's way, so there's an overall fast load of a website. That renders perfectly for the user to actually see, and there's no problems. It's all hosted within one tag, within one interface. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward. The interface itself, I'd love to be able to do a little bit of a demo just to show you what it looks like, but I only have 10 minutes, so I'm not going to be able to do that today. But it's really, really intuitive. We've done a lot of work to make sure that you, as a marketeer who isn't, in most cases very technical, are able to just go through a UI which got drop-downs and explanations through every single point that you use. So it's a very, very easy interface. Once you put that snippet of code on every single page of your site, all you need to do is go into the UI, define your rules, set up your macros. You can be as technical as you want to be, and off you go with your tag. I mean, the other advantage of this as well is I'm not just talking to marketeers. I think for the people who are slightly more technical in the room, it allows you to execute stuff a lot faster, right? So if you do want to have a technical integration of a tag, then GTM just allows you to accelerate that speed in order to get that live. So for the technical developers in the room, I think there's still an advantage through using a tag solution beyond just the marketeers. So marketing agility, right? I mean, the first thing that that jumps out at you is the first challenge that I talked about was about getting campaigns live quickly. If you can add tags anytime you want, you can log in anytime you want. Once you've defined that rule, once you've added in that tag, you can publish that in seconds. So instead of having to bug IT, get onto your developer, have interdepartmental meetings about what's a good thing to do strategically over the next year, you can just publish that in 2 seconds and it doesn't affect the site. From a usability point of view, we have this little thing that you'll see here that actually pops up at every single stage that you have once you're using the tool. It's a little info and tips box. It's really useful. When I just started kind of understanding this stuff at the start, it gives you every explanation, every step that you need to take in order for you to make sure that you're doing this in the right way. So we've really thought a lot about that, because at the end of the day, this is predominantly a self-service tool. So we know that a lot of the time you're going to be doing this yourself. And the last thing is around flexibility. So obviously there's going to be lots of different people accessing this tool at any one time. You can define those user roles. You can define what someone's allowed to do once they access that tool. So you have full control over who can do what and who can't do what, if the case may be. The second challenge I talked about was the dependability of the data and I guess the accuracy of the data, which when manually coding, the tiniest mistake can often mean that you get rubbish out the other end, and it just means that that data is not actionable. We talked a lot about data being actionable in any way. So the biggest advantage here is that you define the rules yourself. So you're not just dropping a tag on the site that fires every time someone visits that page, that site. You define the rules when you want that tag to fire, so that you're not overloading your site with tags all of the time. And also, when you're working through the tool itself, we provide you predominantly, I would say, with 90% of the tags that you want to use. We've got templates in there that you can use. So instead of having to manually custom kind of build that tag within the tool, which you can also do if you choose to, there's lovely templates in there for you to use across some of the things I was talking before. Not just Google products, not just things like Google Analytics and remarketing, but lots of third-party tags that you might want to use in there as well. So again, really, really straightforward. You can be sure that the data is actually clean. I suppose this is just an illustration. For those of you who don't know what asynchronously loading means, it's very straightforwardly put. it means that once you land on the site, that code, that tag is triggered very much straight away and is sent to GTM. But in the front end for the user, the website is rendering and loading very perfectly in front of their eyes. They're not aware of any kind of slowness of the site happening. So it's a very seamless experience for the user, but also the tag is being fired immediately when that rule has been defined in a way that it wants to be fired. So really, really straightforward and a really clever way of doing it. The last thing I talked about, and I think this is the this is the point that's most relevant for us as marketeers, is that it's something that's quick and easy and nimble. It means that you've got all your tags in one place. You don't have to worry about multiple tagging yourself. There's no need to be dumping into this site code to try and figure out where you should be putting the tag. You simply drop it down in the drop-down menu, and that loads onto your site. And we also give you a preview mode. So actually, if you decide that you want to go with a certain tag or a certain rule that you define, then you can preview all of that kind of within the tool itself before you actually publish that to your own site. So again, it's really straightforward, really kind of foolproof in a way for us to use to ensure that we're creating tags correctly and it's doing what we wanted to do on the website. In the last couple of minutes, I just wanted to talk to you really quickly through a few kind of tools and resources that we have as well, because we're all too aware that as Google, a lot of what we do is we bring out wonderful tools and technologies, and we kind of say, figure it out for yourself there, man. That's your problem to deal with. All of your reps will be there for questions here and there, but I think it's important for you to know that we do have other resources as well, so you're not alone. The first place that I started when I started to learn more about this was, most of you are probably already subscribed to the Google Analytics YouTube page as it is, but some of our guys over in the US have put together a really good series of implementational guides around how you actually technically implement this. So it kind of looks a bit scary there, Google Tag Manager technical implementation, but really it's just all about providing you with nice, simple steps in order for you to implement that GTM code correctly and make sure you're in a good place. The other site that you should absolutely all know about in general, not just for this, but for any other developing made easy for you, is the Google Developers microsite hub. This is where we put all of our development support guides, whatever it might be, up online for you guys to use. And again, there's a really good guide there for GTM in terms of implementing that correctly and making sure that you're in a good place. So definitely have a look at that. We'll share all these resources with you afterwards. And this is not necessarily kind of talking to GTM in any way, but this is a Chrome extension that I came across some time back. Some of you guys might be using some kinds of Chrome extensions to understand this, but I really think this is a great one. This is the Google Tag Assistant. If you are using any, whether it is GTM or any other tags, what it allows you to do is it allows you to kind of have a small diagnosis of how your tag is performing, if it is firing correctly. If it's not, what are the critical issues that I need to be addressing? They're not always going to be actionable things for you to look at immediately, but they're really useful for you to have a conversation internally about how you make sure that your tags are firing correctly. So, what I talked about before about garbage in, garbage out, this is really where you make sure that you're putting the tags in place correctly and you're getting the right data out the other end, so it's actually actionable for you. So that was pretty much everything for myself. I only had 10 minutes, so I hope that was pretty much bang on that. Are we going to be through to the panel? Is that
yeah. So thanks very much, Aidan. Thanks. Perfect. Nice one.
I need to do this.
So I think that's really good to first of all talk about the importance of tag management and also give us some tools. Some interesting tweets there. One was we're talking about the kind of why we want to do all these things, but not really delving into the how. We've run a few separate sessions which are just solely focused on the how you do all these things. Very much kind of in detail, getting computers out and getting you guys stuck into doing that. If that's something you want, please provide us with that feedback and we'll set it up. It's no problem at all. What I'd like to do is introduce Rick to the stage, who's currently setting up the chairs. Rick's going to introduce the panel that we have, which is really getting to the core of what this whole day has been about. The last time we ran this session, there was quite a few questions. There was quite a bit of demand for more and more questions. We are going to take some live questions, and we're still running off the Nexus 7 with the hashtag futureofdata. So, Rick, I'll hand it over to you to introduce the guys to the panel, if that's okay.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone. So I have the privilege of running the panel today. I have been at Google for 2 years. Before that, I was in retail. I had various e-commerce and multi-channel roles, the likes of Sony and John Lewis. So hopefully I can see both sides of today. So what we're going to do is we're going to give each panelist 10 minutes to talk about their topic, and then we're going to get together and have a good discussion. And the thing we really want you to do today is to leave with something useful. So please, I encourage you to think about what you would really want to get from a great panel of experts and ask the questions. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm going to introduce Graham Cook. Graham Cook is the founder of Qubit, which is only 3 years old, but they already have 100 people and are going strong and getting clients more and more every week. So Graham, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you very much. Great to be here today. See a few familiar faces out there. Actually going to start with a quick story. So I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, the three of us actually sat in a room. We were all working, Clancy and I were working at Google. Rob, you were working at Latitude, the agency. And we were actually talking about data, conversions, analytics, what's the future, what's going to happen. And we were there trying to figure this out. And this was like 5 or 6 years ago. And so much has happened in the last 5 years. And there's never been a more exciting time for data and embracing data and what that actually means for your business. And you hear it and you're overloaded with this. Data, data, data. Big data this now. Big data that. And so what this really means for e-commerce businesses, it means that we've got a chance to get closer to our customers. It means that we can serve our customers better in an online channel, potentially than we could serve them in an offline channel. Because in an online channel, it's truly about personalization. It's truly about having that one-to-one conversation. And we're aided to do that by data and tracking. And so, we've heard a lot about this today. And I wanted to talk about a couple of stories around what data does for organizations, what it does for e-commerce businesses. So, I founded a company 3.5 years ago after working at Google for 5 years, working on data projects here. And what we looked at when we started Qubit was how could you use data to truly personalize a website. And we looked at trying to understand what personalization was about. Like, how do you do this, really? Now, how do you go beyond product recommendation? How do you go beyond other customers who bought this, bought that? How do you get into becoming the best salesperson on a website? How do you actually take that opportunity? And so what we looked at was that the more data you could put into personalization, it would get exponentially better or drive conversions exponentially better. And so, really, this created a new dawn in e-commerce for truly serving our customer. And so the type of e-commerce personalization signals that we've seen being very powerful, when you take a website, it's made up of about 5 or 6 templates. You have a product page, a home page, a category page, a search page, a basket, and a checkout. That's really the bulk of your website. And who here is e-commerce out of interest? Okay, so we're sort of 60% of the room e-commerce. And I'm really only talking about e-commerce in this context, but we can broaden this out. But really what you're looking at is effectively 5 or 6 templates that drive all the experiences on your website. And so then when you look at those pages, what are they really saying about your customer? What are they really doing? And you take a product page, you've got an image, a description, colors, reviews, SKUs, sizes. There's a tremendous amount of valuable information on that page that is essentially being left behind or unused in the journey. And so, what's emerged in the last couple of years is this concept of tag management. And so I think tag management is really the essence of that data structuring, because what's happened in the past is technologies have selectively decided to use those values in the page. So maybe you had a retargeting technology that used the products that people looked at. Everybody has web analytics, and that uses the order value and the conversion event that happens on the basket and the checkout page. But what tag management has started to say is let's create a universal language for web data. And just in the same way as we create a universal language for the web itself. HTML is a universal language for how you should structure a website so that it works in multiple different browsers. And so when we actually launched a tag management product a couple of years ago, and we did it on the basis of just trying to standardize web data. And really what it was about was how can we actually create a universal way for businesses to actually invest in this, actually invest in structuring data. And we looked at, we actually open sourced this technology and made it free because we wanted to show the industry, the power of being able to do these types of things. We encourage business to make this investment. And so, with the emergence of products like Google Tag Manager, it's doing so much for what the industry can use in terms of data structuring. And so about 6% of the top 100,000 websites use tag management today. Only 6%. But the growth rate shows that 50% will be using tag management in the next 2 years. This is growing faster than web analytics grew, tag management. If you look at the track, this is something that is absolutely going to be bread and butter across every website in the next 5 to 10 years. And so, one of the things that we wanted to do with Google was, and IBM and Adobe, was to actually take this standard, take this open standard, and take these, essentially these approaches to structuring data, and create a new worldwide standard, a web standard. And who here knows W3C, what the W3C is, out of interest? So W3C is a web consortium. This is what Sir Tim Berners-Lee set up as the fundamental underlying standard for the web. And this is where they defined HTML and what HTML would be. And now W3C has moved on and is defining JavaScript standards, defining HTML5 standards. And so what we've been doing for the last year and a half, Google, IBM, Adobe, Qubit, and about 15 other companies, is we've been defining a standard for digital data, customer experience digital data. And this is about the first time of saying all this information, every time you install a new analytics, a new retargeting, a new live chat, anytime you install one of these systems, what we're looking to do is follow a new type of standard. And this means that the investments that you make in adding these technologies aren't a pain. It's not the developer having to say, you've asked me to do this 5 times now this year, and every time I install this technology, all I'm doing is doing the same thing, but I'm just writing it a slightly different way for a slightly different company. And you know what this is analogous to? This is like you buying electronics in your house. You buy a Samsung TV, you buy an Apple TV, and you buy a General Electric microwave. And each of those plugs have the Apple plug, the Samsung plug, and the General Electric plug. And you have to call the electrician every time you buy one of these devices, and you have to ask the electrician to change the plug on the wall for that device. And that's what we've been doing with web data. And so that's really about to change. And I think it's incredibly exciting. And really what it's going to do is it's going to enable us to focus on more valuable activities that actually drive revenue and conversions for our customers. And so, moving on from that, what does this new standard mean for personalization, which is very dear to my heart, is that we're able to understand the customer in a different way. We're able to now start collecting this information, and system-to-system communication starts to work better. So you can install Google Analytics, you can install technology to manage your order management systems, technologies to manage your stock availability, and you can install a personalization technology. And all of these technologies speak to each other. They understand each other's language now because we've created a universal language between them. And so that means they all work better together, and so you get more out of what you do. But really getting onto the customer experience side of things, let me give you a few examples of what you can do with this type of data. You can essentially understand that we've got a customer that understands that at lunchtime there is a 33% increase in conversion. Propensity to buy goes up 33% at lunchtime on a certain set of products for a certain set of customers in a certain part of the country. So that website can now tailor its actual content and information to those lunchtime shoppers because you don't want to create any obstruction. These guys are 33% more likely to buy at this time. Why would you want to cause any obstruction to those buyers? And again, this is based off understanding and democratizing that data. We also saw another customer where you could input rating and review data in a standardized format. They were inputting review information and could see that actually a rating on a product that got 4.5 out of 5 had the highest conversion. And ratings that got 5 out of 5 had a significantly lower conversion. And anything below 3 performed really badly. And this actually showed that customers on this site, they cared about the most believable reviews. 5 out of 5 seemed unbelievable. 4.5 out of 5, and this is in the UK, by the way, 4.5 out of 5 seemed believable. And so what ended up happening is that customer was able to tailor their category pages to focus on 4.5 out of 5 ranged product when people were on the category page. So taking that structured information of what's the page type, it's a category page. Okay, the products I'm showing here, I'm going to order by things that are closest to 4.5. And so it's using that structured information, and it's using that understanding of the customer to create more relevant information on those pages, and it drives sales. It drives sales by about 15% in that case. I'm going to give you one other example of what customers can do with this type of information and data. Is we all need these nudges to encourage us to buy. And so by actually being able to read the stock availability data from the content management system because of the universal language created here, the sites were actually able to tell customers that they only had 3 or 4 items of that dress or item left in stock. And so what it actually was able to show the user dynamically was how much that product was in stock. And so what that did was that told the customer that this stock is running out. If I want this outfit, I need to buy it now because it's going to be gone potentially. And so anytime that what the customer had set up was any items less than 5 in stock was basically where it would show this message. Anything more and it didn't show the message. That drove sales consistently by 15%. So all you're doing is pulling the existing information from your content management system about stock availability and then showing it to the customer when relevant and drive sales by 15% because the customer is thinking this is scarce, it's running out. And so, where we're going is a new dawn in e-commerce. We're going to a place where we can really start to make our websites work more effectively because we're actually structuring the data and the information, and we're making systems much more unified and able to talk to each other. And I just finished on my case study of a customer that's really set up their tracking particularly well, and that's the Shop Direct Group. I don't know if anybody here from Shop Direct Group. No. But Shop Direct Group, and in particular Very.co.uk, they have actually set up over 350 variables across their website. They've structured over 350 inputs across their site. And that is everything from reviews to colors to sizes to SKUs to who the customer is, logged in, logged out, email address, 350 variables using the new open standard. And so they're able to now start more effectively understanding their customer. And then inside of that tag management layer that they've set up, they're able to unify Google Analytics with the Qubit personalization platform, with their order management system, their CRM system. They're able to bring it all together into a unified language and just start trading more effectively and focusing on the things that really drive business for them. And so, one thing I can say today, go back, invest in talking to your IT groups and talking to your IT teams about building in these standards. For the first time, we're actually looking at creating an openness with our marketing and IT teams to say, listen, we can work more effectively together. Tag management builds the bridges between the organization and enables us to focus on more valuable activities like personalization, measurement, more effective marketing. And so, these standards mean that you do them once, and they really last for years. It's not about 4 or 5 times a year asking to install a new marketing technology. It's about saying, that's just handled, that just works. And we really will move to a point where that type of request seems a thing of the past. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. Now I'd like to introduce Rob Jackson. Rob is the founder and head of Elisa DBI, which is now part of Havas, and it's a specialist analytical consultancy. So thank you very much, Rob.
Thanks, Rick. Spelt with an S, by the way, in case anyone's wondering. As Rick said, I head up Elisa DBI over at Havas Media. We're one of the largest dedicated data analytics teams in Europe. We're also a GA premium reseller. We're talking about the future. Clancy's mentioned the past already, so I think I'll start with the present. I'd like a show of hands for all the people who use data in their day-to-day job at the moment, including spreadsheets. So you can get them up. Keep them up if you think that your company makes effective use of the data that it collects in that day-to-day. Okay, so it's going down, so it's about 20%. Well, that falls in line with a recent study by the innovation charity Nesta. I worked with them at the end of last year to survey 500 British companies. It was the first ever government-backed study looking into the use of data by British business. And what it found was that less than 20% of companies surveyed make effective use of the data that they collect. It's an absolutely staggering statistic, particularly when you think we're about to hit 6 billion in ad spend in the UK here alone, and 4/5 of people are really struggling to turn those raw zeros and ones into actual insight that drives tangible business results. So there are a lot of reasons around that we could go on and talk about. We could be here all day, but I'm going to talk about two in particular that we observe at Elisa DBI. The first being having an effective framework, and the second around user centricity. So when we first work with clients, we try and work with them to take them from a point of data collection down here, the sort of foundation where we see most companies stuck almost, the ability to collect accurate and relevant data that's meaningful about their business. The next level up from that, the graduation from there, is the ability then to communicate that data around the organization in an insightful way. Put the correct data in front of the right people so it means something to them, so that they can actually gain insights from that data. And then the golden nugget at the top is taking action on that data, and I think that's where we see most companies today struggle. In fact, it mirrors quite a lot the Access, Empower, Act framework that we talked about, that Clancy talked about, except Elisa have been doing it for years. Sorry, mate. Okay, so a framework is key, and if you can establish that framework, to be successful within that framework, there are three key components. Number one is having the right integrated technology stack, and that's something that we talked about today. Having the right tools in place to collect that data and distribute it in a meaningful way. But also, hugely importantly, is having the right people in place. And I think one of the mistakes that we see time and time again are disparate teams. So the IT department sitting on the ground floor making one decision, that the computer science, the data science team over on the second floor, and the marketing team up on the top floor, all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to communicate with the customers in a way such that we can promote our products and services. Why are these people working in separation? I think an effective data team today needs to be really cross-functional. So in our team, we have statisticians, technologists, marketers, we have analysts, we have business analysts. You need a real mixture of people if you're going to effectively harness the true power of data. And then you need to underpin that team with effective processes as well, something that Google are very good at too. I think, you know, as digital marketers, we've become a little bit complacent. You know, you think back 10 years ago when search came to the fore, and I was amazed at just how accountable it was in comparison to traditional media, to things like TV and radio. And I think, you know, over that time, we've become too focused on clicks and visits and sessions and CPAs and CTRs when they've got nothing to do with the user. The user doesn't care about that. When he's considering your product or service, he doesn't give a crap about what your CTR is. So we need to move away from these traditional digital marketing metrics and start thinking about the user, putting the user at the center of your strategy for data. And the main problem with that is that we see, as the guys have mentioned previously, there are too many silos of data. And we observe sort of three key pillared silos when we engage with clients. And the first pillar will be profile data, so typically held with the client, often the CRM or customer database, but can also include social data, social profile data. The second is multi-channel data, data that's held in your ad servers or within your conversion tags, again, very separate from the first set. And then the third is behavioral, probably most closely aligned with web analytics data, what people do, how they interact with the different digital touchpoints. And so what we're advising clients to do now is make efforts to put those three pillars into a centralized customer platform, a single place where you can query, explore, visualize, run reports on the customer. Not on your digital marketing efforts, but on the actual engagements that the user has. And from that, you can build excellent remarketing lists. You can talk one-to-one with the customer. You can create personalized emails, personalized content on site. But without that complete picture, you're always going to be missing some of that opportunity. So to give a couple of examples of customers where I think we're doing it right, I'll start with a company called UK Flooring Direct. Probably not the most common household name, but we've worked with them for 3.5 years. They're the UK's largest flooring retailer. They've been in the Tech Track 100 2 out of the last 3 years, and they really embrace some of the innovative things that we put forward for those guys. And one of the things we really ask them to do is don't ask us to report on KPIs, is to come to us with open-ended business questions, challenges about what you don't know about your organization. So they came to us one day and said, we send out around £50,000 worth of free samples every month, and we don't know what the hell that effort does. There was no way of telling. You come to the site, you browse the product as normal, you order a free sample, it comes in the post, and they had no way of linking that to final sales. So they had a real challenge attributing marketing spend to that activity. So we used Google Analytics with a custom variable at a visitor level to understand how many people came back after ordering those free samples, and we're able to tell the client that users were 5 times more likely to convert after ordering a sample, a piece of intelligence that they just didn't know. And so off the back of that, we could then more effectively push budget into the right marketing channels, and we could also help them estimate how many samples to send out each month to hit their targets. Off the back of that came another business challenge. So they had thousands and thousands of samples that were going out each month, and only 20 call center staff with which to deal with the follow-ups for that. And so what we did is we combined 2 sets of data together. We looked at their customer database, and we saw how many people had ordered these free samples, and then we used user-centric web analytics based around the user to see what products they'd looked at, how recently they'd been, what was the average order value of that product. And then what we were able to do is create a bit of a scorecard for the call center, a hit list. So they were able to start at the top with the hottest leads and work their way down. And what we actually did was implement a split test in the call center. And we found that the guys using our intelligence were outperforming the guys who weren't. So we're talking online, offline, open business questions. We're not talking about website KPIs, but we were applying a technological and data-driven solution to achieve that aim. Another client, My Warner, part of Warner Brothers, they have a content platform where you can go and see trailers and view movies and things like that. And what we've done for those guys is implement a single sign-on technology. It's actually a proprietary technology of Havas's, where you can log in using Facebook, Google+, Twitter, or indeed your email. And what we do is we're very honest with the user about what we're doing. We're getting access to your social profile data, but in return, we're going to give you exclusive content, access to trailers before other people, competitions that you might not get. And so what we're entering into is an exchange with the user, a clear and honest exchange. They're passing us their data so that we can communicate to them in more of a one-to-one way. They know that they're going to get adverts and newsletters coming their way, but they would rather that newsletter, that comms, is more relevant to them. And so we've seen fantastic results for that. 5 times the number of click-throughs from the social property through to the Amazon page where we can purchase DVDs. And what we're doing there is also adding to that web analytics data as well. So we've got a centralized platform, a data warehouse. The single sign-on data passes through into there, and we mix that with the behavioral data from the website using GA, so we know what they've looked at, and we also know their passions, their interests, whether they like Forrest Gump, and what movies they might want to hear about in the future. So obviously we're here at Google, and I'm really blown away by some of the innovations the guys have done with Universal Analytics. I think if you're not considering it yet, you need to start now. Clancy tells me that the user ID override is coming out in November for everyone. Is that right? But the fact is, we're going to be transforming Google Analytics from what was a web tool to a business analytics tool. And so you guys really need to start thinking about the framework with which you're going to use that tool. And if you don't start thinking about it now, your competitors are going to have that jump on you when it comes to the time. But just 2 little tools I'm going to talk to you about. So I was with Clancy last week in Mountain View, seeing all the new releases. And there was 2 fantastic tools that really struck a chord with me. And one of the things I hear when I speak to analysts in particular, I say, why aren't you doing this data exploration? Why aren't you digging in deeper into the data? They said they're stuck with reporting. It's a very common complaint that we hear from analysts within companies. And there's a fantastic little tool called Magic Script, which you can get from the GA dev page, from the API page. And what it allows you to do is open up Google Spreadsheet and just list all of the columns, metrics, and dimensions that you want in that sheet, and it downloads them automatically through the API. And what you can do is set that periodically to run the queries that you want. And then if you're clever, using Google Spreadsheets, you can actually set triggers to fire that into visualizations. So that daily KPI report that you spend 20 minutes, half an hour running every day can be generated automatically for you as soon as you sit down at your desk. Taking that another step further, there's a little tool called Super Proxy, and that allows you to publish that data in a public way. You can embed it in an email and send it to your boss, and there we go, you've won the first 45 minutes back of your day. So it allows you to get to that point where you're actually looking into the data and trying to analyze it. And so I think, the thing I'm gonna leave you with is working towards user identification. I think maybe some of the content providers that I speak to think, if they're not an e-commerce site, then they're not going to really push people to log in. There's other ways to identify users in this strategy. If you're really going to leverage universal analytics, some of the things that we've seen, I saw a really interesting one from Made.com recently. And you go to their site, it recognizes if you're a first-time visitor and offers you a £10 discount as soon as you land in return for your email. And I was halfway through typing in before I realized what they were doing. It was quite a clever trick. Their average order value is maybe £500. So it was just encouraging the user. It was giving them something in return for that identification. And so the one thing I'd say is in advance of the release of Universal Analytics, is start thinking about what you can give to your users in exchange for that identification from them. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Rob, if you want to stay on the stage, that would be great. Also going to reintroduce Clancy to join the panel. Go ahead. Thank you. So lots of questions. Keep them coming, though, please. I really want you to get the most out of today. I'll start with a really juicy one in a second, but first, just a brilliant comment from someone. De La Soul said it was 3, but apparently 4.5 is the magic number for user review conversions. So thanks, Graham, for that. The question I'd love to start with is this one, which is from a member of the audience. Thank you for that. It appears that we're at a crossroads for the future of data. Cookie versus sign-in, which is obviously a common theme we've had today. Will sign-in work, and is it really about personalization? Graham.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, the cookie is in jeopardy for a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, because it's there's two sides of the coin to look at as well. First of all, I'll speak from a retailer's perspective. The cookie's in jeopardy because it's a great way of identifying a customer. It's a great way of being able to personalize and understand who my customer is as they use my website. And they don't need to log in to do that. It enables me to retain that information as they move from page to page. A first-party cookie is what enables you to keep an item in your basket as you move between pages in a checkout. Now, so that's a useful thing. Now, being able to give offers without knowing who you are because you're back again for the third or fourth time, again, all driven by a cookie, it's a great way of personalizing without having to go through the hassle of logging in. The third-party cookie, which is the one which is mainly used in advertising, tracks the user across the web. That's the one that's probably the most discussed, in jeopardy, and most also a question of privacy, which I'll come on to the second part of that. But it's really, that's the one where there's an issue, because it's getting deleted, it's getting, we don't know who that user is, we aren't able to use that cookie in that many ways anymore because of the way that browsers are handling that now. And so, speaking from a privacy perspective, on a third-party basis, yeah, users are getting more wise, being, what the tracking is doing to them across the web, and privacy regulators are starting to restrict that, and browsers are starting to block it. So yeah, I mean, as a technology, it's starting to come up in question: can it still be used? But on a first-party basis, I still think it's it's absolutely useful, absolutely key to creating good website experiences. I'm speaking from an on-site perspective. So.
I'd just jump in with, I think the question isn't necessarily about cookies per se. I think what people are focusing on is the difference between signed-in identified users and your anonymous users. And one interesting thing that we've been looking at, and obviously a lot of our clients have, is what percentage of your clients actually would go and sign in and would actually give you information to identify themselves. I doubt that anybody is going to get 100% signed-in users. So you're always going to have some segment of your visitors who are not identified to you. Either they don't see the value in it, or they're brand new to the site, they haven't had a chance to identify themselves, or they just simply don't want to. Now, let's think of this like let's think of Tesco, for instance. So offline, many Tesco customers have their Tesco club card, their loyalty club card, right? So Tesco knows something about those users. They have an identified set of users there. But that doesn't mean that they go and ignore everybody who comes into the store and doesn't use a club card. There's always going to be a percentage of people who are just walking in, buy something, and leave. So what I think it's not a question of what's going away or what technology is going to be there. It's going to be what is the data approach for both personalized signed-in users and those that are not. I think we all have a lot of experience of working with the non-signed-in users. I mean, that technology has been around for a while in things like Google Analytics. We're just introducing the ability to sign in now and having what is the additional analysis you can do on those signed-in and personalized users, and what are the opportunities that you can put in front of those users to increase conversion. So I don't want to necessarily frame it as, let's focus on one group or the other group. It's sort of what is your mixed strategy on dealing with those two audiences, and what can you do with those signed-in ones at the same time while not neglecting those users that you will just never be able to identify to that level.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's a combination. I can't see cookies going away anytime soon. One of the interesting things that we've done is we keep that anonymous session ID persistent, and then when the user does identify themselves, we overwrite that with the user ID and store it in a third-party database. So what we can actually do is link together that anonymous session behavior and the logged in activity. And then what that allows us to do is better understand the awareness, consideration, and purchase flow that the user has. But I think it comes down, again, going back to incentives. I've seen companies do really well with giving out free samples and free gifts and things like that. At any chance you can identify the user, then your data is going to be much more robust further down the line. And it doesn't have to be everyone. You don't have to get everyone logged in. Once you've got a significant enough subset of users who are logged in, then you can extrapolate user behavior from that set, perform analysis on that. I think people often get too keen to deal in absolutes when it comes to web analytics. They need to remember that we're looking for trends and outliers and patterns in the data.
There's been one comment about you don't have to rely on logged inness to identify a user, obviously in addition to cookies. Any thoughts on other methods to identify people?
Yeah, I mean, again, like the cookie is a great way of keeping a persistent understanding of the user, and that's why from a first party, who here understands the difference between first and third party cookies out of interest? Okay, so it's about 40% of the room. So for a first-party cookie is where the website you're on is issuing the cookie. It's coming from that domain. It's the checkout persistent basket cookie. Third-party is where it's a third-party domain issuing that cookie, which means it can look at your browsing behavior across other websites. So I think the first-party cookie is the de facto non-logged-in way to understand the user. It's also the most legal way, and I wanted to touch on privacy very quickly because it's an important subject for us in Europe. The privacy regulators in Europe, in the European Union, stipulate that you need to give your customer a right. You need to tell them what they're being tracked about, and then you need to give them a right to be forgotten. And a right to be forgotten is very, very cleanly done by a cookie because you can clear that cookie in the browser. Now, if you're using a non-cookie method of identifying a non-logged-in user, then how are they going to de-identify themselves? There's less of a common understanding there. So I think it's critical that we stay legal and stay within the framework, because there are other methods such as fingerprinting, using browser signals, such as date timestamps, the browser version you're using, the plugins. There's a lot of fingerprinting technologies out there that can identify the unique user, and that's all done server side, and it's very hard to be forgotten. And I think that is a a high risk if we go down that road. I think it's dangerous.
How do you, as a website owner or as a lead in marketing, how do you protect yourself against those potential issues? Because the more that we're giving away our data or our cookie lists, we're not always sure exactly what happens to those. Are we really building that into privacy policies?
Is it from a user or
from I'm talking about website owners or marketing leads.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, from a website owner perspective, like if you managing your website, your CMS, your basket, your personalization, all of those are on a first-party basis. You're responsible for that. You know, on a first-party, you know, as the retailer, you take on the legal onus of what you do with that data you collect. So you need to make sure all that first-party data that collects PII is treated in a way as the data controller, which is the legal term. You are responsibly storing that information, using that information, and any first-party technology that is using PII and using that information, it needs to follow the rules because you are responsible for it. And so you need to make sure the vendors you buy from that work on a first-party basis are doing that. Now, third-party technologies like ad technologies and retargeting and all these things that understand you as you go across the web, those are really blurred lines in terms of responsibility. Because those technologies are kind of the owners of the user. They're the owners of the cookie. They issued the cookie. And those are actually, technically, they are responsible. But it is a blurred line. So again, you need to make sure your vendors are legitimate and they're you know, understand their privacy laws, understand where you might be liable. Because the European Union, you know, we just saw the beginning of this last year with the cookie law. The European Union is going to DEFCON, the next DEFCON, in terms of what they're going to do around this. It's the Vivian Redding. It's the same person who's cracked down on all the roaming charges across Europe. She won, by the way. She destroyed the profits of the mobile phone networks. She's doing the same thing to data tracking on the web.
So the more you have an open architecture based on first party, which means you have control, less need to give away you know, your data through third parties. That's a win-win, basically.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win. I mean, tag management and Unify, it gives you a better audit control. Like Google Tag Manager, there are like 7 other tag management systems out there, including OpenTag. But like, you know, there are, you know, these systems enable you to audit the third-party technologies and the first-party technologies you're using on your website, which gives you control.
Do you think the EU legislation's been clear? I see huge inconsistencies with the deployment of this, and clients often come to us. We have to distance ourselves because we're not legal advisors.
So I think that is a very key. So one of the things that was very confusing for a lot of website owners was the cookie law, because it was specifically going back to sort of this. It was talking about a technology but wasn't actually really addressing the key end user point, which is, I want to have some understanding about what data is being used about me and how. And so for website owners, I mean, putting the cookie stuff aside, there has to be, for any business anywhere, there has to be some idea of what is the value of each point of data that you're collecting. So sometimes the tag guys or the data scientist guys, they come up with these amazing ideas of how we can, you know, instrument something where we could follow somebody home at night or something and see what they're watching. You know, like, but the first question is, what is the actual incremental value of collecting that additional data? What are you actually bringing to the business that you couldn't do before? And then on the other side of that, it also has to be a certain amount of what is the cost, the legality, the risk of collecting that data. Not all data is something that you potentially want to be collecting, nor does it actually, if you see something where you're saying, well, we could get that data, not really sure how we'll use it to improve our business insights, but it might be a little bit touchy for some of our users to have. These are the kind of decisions that have to be made by businesses. It's not just sort of a free-for-all of saying, let's collect everything and see what happens. Even internally at Google, every product that is developed by Google, we have to go through a design process, a privacy design process, to explain what are the parts of data that we're collecting, and can we do without each of them. And this is incredibly important for us, obviously, because there's a lot of focus on Google and privacy. But it's also something that any business can benefit from. Why do we need this piece of information? In many cases, login might not be the thing you need. If you're a lead gen site, you might have some information when somebody puts in something saying, hey, I want to get a quote about this. Really, all you really want to know is connecting that quote ID number. You don't need the person to give you all of their information. You just need that quote information. That is probably more valuable to be passed on to the call center software than a whole record of all that user's information.
Definitely products with less consideration time. There's so much you can glean from things like site search, landing page, keyword. You can assess that intent and retarget them with personalization content without the need for login as well. It can be really effective from an anonymous point of view.
And again, it goes back to the fact that, like, even though we live in this world where you hear one-to-one marketing more and more, and everybody wants to sort of reach out to these, you're still working with segments. Anybody who's specifically saying, okay, let's go through line by line in the CRM. Ah, there's Graham. Well, what do we know about Graham? Let's send him this email. You're never going to do that. So it comes down to, like, the segments you're building.
There's a massive diminishing return of one-to-one marketing. If you're spending time coming up with a personal marketing message for each individual customer, you're spending the time badly. You know,
you need more clients.
Yeah, I mean, Google has an ad platform.
Yes, I heard.
I think we should have done a data audit of all three of you actually before we came into it.
Yeah, I'm clean.
That probably would have.
I'm squeaky clean.
That probably would have, got the privacy issue. Off the back of Clancy, what we were talking about, good questions coming. Can Google reassure advertisers that their OBA products are ASA compliant? As 77% of the UK are not, according to the latest ASA report.
So I actually don't. Disclaimer: I don't actually work on the advertising side. I work on analytics, so I can't speak specifically for the behavior.
Okay, we will take that offline, okay. And we will come back to the room and everyone joining us from the link. Also, I've had a great comment here. Problems with sign-in or personalization. Approach it like your mum would. Embarrassment, Big Brother, Google being nosy Parker. So I don't know who said that, but thank you very much. There's been a lot of talk about how we work with our IT teams and how that conversation starts, and also how we speed it up, because I think pace is something that often trips people up. So what experiences have you got that you've had with the people you work with that are good case studies of that, where engagement with IT teams has been pacey and productive?
Yeah, I mean, we just launched a Forrester report yesterday on this topic, and we surveyed 180 decision makers in the US and the UK about how they work with their IT team, how they work with their digital marketing technologies. And speaking from the general report, one of the fundamental things that came out of it was that who's buying the marketing technologies, who's buying the customer experience technologies today. And so last year it was predominantly IT was buying them. This year it's predominantly marketing. Next year it's predominantly e-commerce. And so what we're seeing is this evolution into the joined up team, which is IT and marketing working together under the umbrella of e-commerce. And so I think what we see is the best case studies for teams working well together is when the team has actually got some type of front-end development within the group, so they can do things like tagging, JavaScript changes to the site, make changes to the front end, and they're working with the marketing team. The most extreme case I've seen of this is a very interesting startup in the travel sector that actually has their development team and marketing team working together, and they're commissioned off. They actually get paid monthly off the net promoter score of the parts of the site they look after. So the customer says, I enjoyed this part of the site. They get asked to score it. Would you, net promoter score, would you give this a 9? That's a promoter. Anything below a 7 is a detractor. They get paid on the back of that. So they're so tightly integrated with what the customer's experience is. And so that's where we're going. All of this is really driving us to get closer to the customer. So if your organization isn't structured to be close to the customer, then it doesn't work.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the reasons we are where we are with tag management is because IT don't give a crap about marketing tags. They go to the bottom of the list and we wait 3 months. And so if you can turn around to the lead developer and say, I'm going to give you back 25 hours of one of your guys' time this month, and what I'm going to do is use it, I'm going to do that within the confines of your compliance. We're going to do it on the staging environment. We're going to put it on the test environment. You're going to have full control as well, and you're not going to have to waste any time on it. And your page is probably going to load faster. They're happy as Larry.
Yeah. Everybody's life gets better there because you're reducing inefficiency. So when you reduce inefficiencies, both teams win. And that's the benefit of this type of work.
As you said, mate, you need that tech resource in that team, in that marketing team as well. Too many times this year I've had presentations from marketing tech vendors who said, even marketers can do it. And it's a piece of advice I give you all is don't let your PPC guy go copying tags to launch on the site through your tag management tool. You need that tech know-how.
Yeah.
I increasingly think that it's a prerequisite for a marketing director now to be tech literate.
Yeah.
That it not even when e-commerce is not involved, for example, in that company, it's just a prerequisite because of data and because of what it's. And building on the user centricity point, what sort of metrics? You know, there were metrics I mentioned earlier as well. What are the new metrics that you think we need to be looking at beyond? You know, we had silos, I think, before between you know, click-through rates, etc., on the digital side, and then traditional marketing metrics. So what are the new metrics that perhaps cluster around you know, the user centricity?
What's funny, I knew you were going to say, is that's not a new metric. Yeah. That's a metric. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day. It was sometimes like people are like, oh, we could do all this stuff now with our online data. And you go talk to the guys who've been doing catalogs for, you know, tens of decades. And like, well, recency, frequency, and monetization. Congratulations! Like, welcome to what we've been doing.
RFM and LTV, they've been around for 20 years.
But so now
we're going backwards. No?
Well, but I think what we're doing is we're tying back to users, and these are the metrics that we had to kind of ignore a bit in digital for a very long time, and now they can come back. If anything, you're looking at some of these propensity models that you mentioned, like Shop Direct, like these propensity models that these companies have had for a very long time. Now you're just basically saying, well, we're not throwing these away. Like, the web guy's not here to just like say, oh, you're doing it wrong. We're saying, actually, maybe there's more data that we can bring into these models that actually help us better understand the propensity for conversion, the propensity to churn, based on other data sets.
There was a fantastic talk at Summit last week by a professor from Wharton University, the number 3 MBA school in the world, and he was talking about lifetime value and calculations, all the maths behind it, and how traditionally we've put it on retention and development of customers. That metric is around retaining and developing existing customers. But his hypothesis was that it can be used more effectively for acquisition. His main takeaway from his talk was go and perform lifetime value analysis on all of your customers in your database today, and then look for the consistent variables and use that in your acquisition strategy when you're targeting new users, because it's much easier to acquire a high-value customer and keep him than it is to take a low-value customer and turn him into a high-value one.
Yes, I think the really exciting things that are happening is the old rules are becoming relevant again, because the ability to execute on them, it's all down to execution. The ability to execute on them has been fundamentally changed. And so the ability, you know, lifetime value and churn analysis has never been able to happen at the granularity that it can happen today. And the ability to then execute on it in real time, actually be able to act on this, is also fundamentally changed. And that, you know, the leading technologies or the leading businesses of tomorrow will be the ones that can act on this information and can generate insights. And, you know, I think one of the other things that I've found to be pretty interesting is there's 3 ways you can look at your business. You can look at your acquisition cost, so how much is it per channel to acquire a customer. You can look at your visitor data, like who are my visitors, how much do they cost to acquire, and you look at your product and merchandising, so how successful are these products. You need to bring these 3 together, and you need to, it's like a cube, you need to look at each side of the cube in a different way. Yeah. And so the power of the granularity that we have today and the combination of the older methodologies of yesterday are going to create the new business of tomorrow.
So I think there's a consensus in the room clearly that this is the way that we all need to operate going forward, to have the user centricity, to have the data centricity. Often, as well as IT teams, it falls down, you know, when you're talking to the boards of these companies. We're hosting another event actually on the 21st of November to try and get, you know, your CEOs, etc., to have this conversation. But again, have you got examples where you've seen that very senior level engagement happen, and there be a transformational you know, change from you know, the CEO and the board in terms of how they approach you know, the importance of data, and particularly back to the organizational point, how they build their organizations for the future. Have you seen any good examples of that? Yeah,
I remember seeing the transformation of this when I started Google in 2005, and I remember that back then, you know, when Google was talking to businesses, it was like, here's a cool ad and look at Larry and Sergey, they built a computer with Lego. And that was kind of the early stage conversations that we had. And then it evolved into like, this is a serious growth channel. This is interesting. And then I remember the senior members of Google actually going to sit on, they actually would update boards about what Google can do for businesses. And now we're starting to see, board placements of digital experts in teams. And I think where the CEO, and this is more of a multi-channel, because in a pure play, of course, they know the importance of these things. In a multi-channel business, now the biggest growth channel is the web. The most profitable channel is the web. So the CEO is now building his arsenal to understand that. And so we're starting to see new roles emerge. So we're seeing more and more of the chief growth officer. This is almost like a technical and a marketing role kind of combined together. And the CMO is now taking a much more important role within the organization because they're tied to the growth of that company and the future of that company. So that's the sort of changes I've started to see over the years.
I think to sort of build on that, there's it used to be very much that you had maybe a head of business intelligence, maybe before it was called business intelligence. You sort of sat in the basement with a bunch of other IT geeks working on things, and then you had the marketing penthouse or whatever where the CMO was, and there wasn't much connection there. What we've definitely seen a lot more of are CMOs getting these VPs of business intelligence directly reporting to them. We know that the CMO IT budget is prepared to eclipse the CIO and CTO IT budgets for most organizations going forward. So there's a whole question of, this role of either chief data officer or VP of business intelligence that in a lot of the clients that I work with, we're seeing more of that going. The hardest part that I keep hearing about is how difficult it is to find somebody in that role. Because you don't want to put a person in that role who's just a hardcore data scientist, who just wants to play with the tags and the map reduce and the BigQuery and all that. You need to have somebody who's actually totally aligned with also commercially what the business is doing.
The rise of the marketing technologist.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, working with web analytics for 9 years now, I was never having conversations with the CIO or the CEO where previously they really want my opinion now. And I think, for those two silos to both succeed, they need to almost embrace each other and accept that their future is inextricable.
Brilliant, thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. It was great. I think a great theme to end on there, which is the rise of the marketing technologist. I'm pretty sure that most of you in the room are exactly that. And I think the one thing perhaps you should take away from today is the confidence to go out there and carry that agenda forward within your company. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's nice.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, man.
Have we got you a little bottle of whiskey as a little thanks? When Irish, because we're ridiculously proud Irish people. Yeah, go on the bushy. I know, man. It's got to be.